economic development in Durban. Ramokgopa was responding to concerns by business that the current long period of suspended load shedding could lapse after the polls.
It's a fundamental repudiation of the message you have been giving, that in fact the resolution of energy problem in our country, it's a political football. So if an incumbent government wants to win an election, they wouldn't have had load shedding in the first place. Because what that does, it decimates industry. You design load shedding so that you can resolve it closer to an election. It's some of the most illogical articulation I've ever heard.
The two suspects arrested in connection with the death of 5-year-old Ditebogo Phalane have appeared in two separate courts in Soshanguve and in Pretoria North. They're facing charges for the possession of unlawful firearms and ammunition. At this stage, they have not been linked to the boys' murder. However, the NPA is adamant that they could be positively linked as investigations continue. Ditebogo was shot and killed during a car hijacking in Soshanguve. He was shot as he ran to his father, who was driving into their home last week Friday. NPA spokesperson Lumkama Hanjan.
At this point, the two accused are not linked to the murder of the 5-year-old. However, because the matter is now postponed for identity parade and other investigations, so if those investigations link them to that offense, then they will be charged with that offense. One accused appeared at the Soshanguve Magistrates Court and another accused appeared at the Pretoria North Magistrates Court. But both in respective courts, they are facing a charge of possession of unlicensed firearm and possession of ammunition.
And a temporary pier built by American troops has been used for the first time to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. The first consignments were brought ashore a few hours ago. The BBC's Dan Johnson.
It enables larger ships to dock with aid consignments that are being shipped from Cyprus, and they are then ferried to the shore. So this is another route for aid to reach the hungry Palestinian refugees of Gaza. But the emphasis by the US, the UN and others involved in this operation is that this is a temporary measure, that it is additional, that it does not replace the aid flows that should be continuing through Gaza's land borders. And that has been a serious issue over the last week, particularly with the Rafah crossing with Egypt having been closed.
The top story this hour, Western Cape Premier Ellen Windy says now that the George Building collapse rescue and recovery operation has concluded, they'll do whatever they can to ensure that those involved are held accountable. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemele.
And coming up in your sports this hour, Brazilians in samba mode after winning the bid to host 2027 Women's World Cup. Scotty Scheffler arrested outside PGA Championship and charged with assault on police officer, while Swiatek to face Sabalenka for Rome title and Serena record. More details at 3:30.
Here, there and everywhere. SAFM 104.6 FM in Tshwane. The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
Now, you know the story, and it's been going on for many, many years, right? You travel abroad, and you bump into somebody who somehow finds out that you're South African, and they say immediately, I know your language, and then they say a few words in Afrikaans, right? That continued for a long period during the entire apartheid South Africa period, right? Well, at that stage, the only official languages were, that we officially spoke were, Afrikaans and English, right? But, well, what about now? So, generations of South Africans that are not black, as in black African, well, they cannot speak an African language. Whether you're talking about isiXhosa, isiZulu. In fact, you can go through the whole lot of the languages we have. The majority of people who are not black African absolutely struggle to do that. And that includes me, okay? Yes, maybe some of us, like myself, can mumble a few words and string a line or two, but overall, the answer is no, right? So I speak by myself, and I think I reflect the pulse of millions of people, and that is this. I mean, that must change, isn't it? It has to change. How do we popularize the need for non-vernacular speakers to string more than a couple of words? How do we do that? If we don't have an intervention, it won't just happen. You know that, right? So how about we create workshops nationwide? And I'm not talking about for school children. I'm talking about for adults, okay, for much older people. We have workshops nationwide. Unless you've got a better idea, whatever it is, workshops, better idea, your idea, my idea, I don't know, okay? All I'm saying to you, right, there's got to be something, because understanding language is the basis of understanding people, how they think, how they feel, and how they feel about you, right? That has to be the basis of nation building. So I'd leave it to you, so we can go beyond, Sawubona and Sanibonani and just that, and do a lot more. And I'm looking forward to your suggestions, not complaints, but actual practical suggestions, how we can popularize the use of vernacular languages across the length and breadth of our country. I'm Ashraf Garda, and that's my point. Well, now, what's yours?
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
In 2006, the Democratic Alliance won Cape Town by just one seat.
With just 42 votes, he recently won Umgeni,
bringing remarkable progress to rural KwaZulu-Natal.
because people voted for change.
DA-run Midvaal is now the best-run municipality in Gauteng.
And a new story was written for the Western Cape when people voted DA.
But if you want a new government that works, then you have to vote for it.
In this election, every single vote will count. Your vote can rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC. The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
The National Pulse starts now, and here's a question for you. Who drives the National Pulse, and what drives the National Pulse? While you think about all of that, and you know that you can always answer that question by literally answering it via WhatsApp, text, or voice notes, right? Feel free to comment on my That's My Point feature about the popularizing of languages, vernacular languages across the country to adults, because that has not happened at any scale and probably should have happened as part of our nation-building process of 1994. So I value your comments, voice notes, text 0614 104 107. Otherwise, you can call in live 086 000 2032. We have so much to talk about today. You are aware that South Africa presented at the ICJ yesterday, calling for an immediate stopping of what they see as the Israeli assault on Palestine or Gaza, but Rafah specifically. And today the Israeli response happened. We'll comment. We'll get updates on that. Play sound. Get comments from multiple different sources on that one. There, we'll certainly cover that issue. And we'll also look at the election funding issue, because some of the parties have revealed voluntarily who funds them. And I'll tell you what, they make some interesting numbers. The DA wins the league at this point in time with regard to funding, but who's second, that may well surprise you. However, what should be a concern for you right now is our big story to start with, which is the SIU, the Special Investigative Unit, with the assistance of the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigations. We know the Hawks conducted searches and seized evidence at Home Affairs offices in 5 provinces as part of an ongoing investigation into the affairs of the Department of Home Affairs. Now, the searches follows a tip-off from a whistleblower that suggested that Home Affairs officials are colluding with syndicates to duplicate application status file. So this would be foreign nationals then wanting to live in this country and being allowed with documentation being processed illegally under refugee status or whatever it is. I understand there's been some serious developments around that issue. There's been arrests made. Let's find out more about it with the SIU spokesperson, Kaiser Kganyago. Kaiser, goodness, it's been a long, long time. How are you?
Long time indeed.
Absolutely. Right. Tell us, of course, we're talking in the context of a bad news story. What has actually happened?
Yeah, what basically happened is that that sometime in February we got a proclamation from the president to investigate Home Affairs and look at all the papers that they are issuing there, be it corporate visas, business visas, any other documentation. And while we were busy with that, a whistleblower came to us and indicated that the bigger problem is with the issue of asylum seekers. People who come in here under the pretext that they want asylum in this country, they then pay the officials of the Department of Home Affairs centers that are dealing with immigration centers, and then they then get into the country illegally, and then they are able to ultimately get resident permits and so on and so on. And that is why we then went to the judge and we got an order that allowed us to go and do the search at the 5 asylum seeking centers or what we call the refugee centers.
Okay, what did you find?
Obviously, we took a lot of computers. It might be over gadgets, about over 120 gadgets that we took, that we are still going to mirror and then understand what is happening there. But we also found very dubious people. Like in one of these offices, we found a person who was having 18 cell phones, banner phones in his office with SIM cards and everything. But that is an indication. We are still going to do the investigation. We wanted to gather the information because we are worried that if we do not get in quickly, that information is going to disappear.
And so at this point in time, have actual arrests been made? I mean, I understand there's been, you've uncovered some evidence, right? Has there been actual arrests?
No, we are not at the stage of arrest at the moment. We are still on the investigative side. We going to just over the weekend mirror all of those computers and gadgets and then give it back to their owners next week. And then we start analyzing this information, who was given visas, who was not. Because you need to understand that these people are the people who are causing havoc in this country because they cannot be traced. Just take a simple example of what is happening now in George, where people have been found, but because they cannot be traced, we don't even know who they are. And then it becomes problematic because there are so many people who got into the country unlawfully and they do illegal activities, and we end up with a country that is grey listed. We end up with countries that do not trust our documentations and so on. And we are still at that stage. If we find the criminality, we are going to send it to the LPA so that the arrests can be done by the Hawks.
Okay, I do understand that in terms of the investigation, that there's been the one center, refugee center in the Pretoria region, where there's been a whole lot of people being investigated. Is that correct?
Yes, we were doing in five provinces. When one of them is the refugee center here in Marabastad in Pretoria, where out of the what we call people that we are focusing on. This one alone has got about 60 people that they come in to renew their things here in Pretoria.
So 60 from the one center in Marabastad and about 120 overall people who are all, to get it right, employed by Home Affairs who are being investigated.
Yes, those are our people of interest. Therefore, there are only 5 centers in the country. One is here in Pretoria, the other one is in Musina in the Limpopo province, one in Western Cape, one in Eastern Cape, and one in KwaZulu-Natal. Therefore, you can clearly see, if there is one in the Western Cape, how do people travel all the way to come to this particular one in Gauteng?
Does this suggest that and I know we're preempting, but does this suggest that the problem is far bigger than any one of us, including yourself, would have imagined?
It is. From what what we saw there when we arrived, you can see that the problem is bigger. But it is also bigger for the generation that comes, because if we have an influx of foreign people who get fraudulent documentation because people just want to enrich themselves. People don't understand that you can get few thousands to give this person a document, but that is going to affect the whole country and will end up with our children suffering when we are grey listed and there are no investments and all of these things. For example, now we used to travel to London without a visa. Now we can't because of this kind of things.
So it impacts upon South Africa's worthiness in terms of mobility around the world, and I think your point is valid there. Do we know, just as the last point, how many foreign nationals are in this country that are documented but illegally documented? I mean, do we have any idea?
We don't at the moment. We are working with Home Affairs on that. One of the things that we did to us this morning was to go and mirror image the what do you call it, the server at that services the whole of the Home Affairs, which is housed by FITA. We will then, on the basis of what we find there, be able to answer that question.
Okay, that's where we can leave it. Kaiser Kganyago, the Special Investigative Unit spokesperson, much appreciate your time. A huge cause for concern. There you are. As we recap, 60 Home Affairs employees at one refugee centre in Marabastad, Pretoria, 60 in the 4 or 5 others around the country. They are under investigation, if not officially charged, but investigation on the basis of they may have collaborated in actually processing foreign nationals and turning them into legally resident of South Africa under whatever guise, refugees, whatever. But that certainly has been uncovered, and that story clearly is a big, big story indeed. I wonder what you make of that. Of course, as Kaiser Kganyago says, no idea how many of these foreign nationals are living in the country, technically legally because they have documentation, but the documentation is actually illegal. I wonder how many they are. 0614 104 107. If you want to comment on that and the way forward on that issue, I'd love to know. Otherwise, 086 000 2032. And you can also use the hashtag The National Pulse, because that's what we do. We drive the National Pulse on this show. You can tag us on SFM Radio and myself, Ashraf Garda, on all the different social media platforms. We will pick it up. I'll look at other issues, including your calls, right after this.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far. The Democratic Alliance is on a mission to rescue South Africa. Together with the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa, we have a real chance to bring in a new government that works. We can turn things around, but we cannot do it without you. In this election, the stakes are simply too high. Every single vote is going to count. A strong DA can rescue South Africa. Join the rescue mission on the 29th of May. Vote DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned. The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
The SABC Fortune Combo radio stations, which includes SAFM, Lotus FM, and Radio 2000, seek the services of a freelance graphic designer who will collaborate with cross-functional teams to create visually compelling assets that align with our receptive brand identities and resonate with our target audiences. The minimum requirements for the position are a bachelor's degree or diploma in graphic design, visual arts, or related field, 2 to 4 years proven experience as a graphic designer with a strong portfolio showcasing a range of design projects. All interested candidates should submit their CVs and portfolio of evidence to vacancy@safm.co.za. Application closed on the 26th of May 2024. For more detailed info, visit www.safm.co.za or follow us on our social media pages at SAFM Radio.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
Now, Frank Chikane was detained, tortured and poisoned by the apartheid government, but he never stopped fighting for freedom. In 1994, he flew in a helicopter over the endless lines of South Africans voting for the very first time, and he said afterwards that what he saw was unimaginable. On May the 29th, the Kagiso Trust's Remember Me initiative encourages South Africans to honour Chekani's struggle by exercising the right he fought so hard for, the right to vote. #Remember Me.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
I see people commenting about the Home Affairs issue, people commenting about issues of learning vernacular languages for people who are not naturally attuned to that and why it's that important. I will pick up those calls as soon as I can. Believe me, I want to hear what you have to say. But let's look as part of our Global Watch feature, one of the biggest stories, certainly of the last 2 days. Yesterday, South Africa presenting once again at the ICJ over the issue of Israel and the attacks on Rafah. Today, it was the chance of Israel to defend that position. So let's just get clarity. Israel insists that the Rafah attack is key to defeating Hamas following the October 7th attacks. Yesterday, South Africa argued before the ICJ that a full Israeli assault on Rafah would violate the clause of the Genocide Convention that prohibits deliberately conflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. However, our guest Anne Hertzberg is of the view that the Hamas continues to weaponize the ICJ via South Africa, and according to her, the ICJ continues to allow it. She's arguing, therefore, that Israel should counterclaim against South Africa for incitement to genocide, also stating that countries of conscience should also consider sanctions on South African officials for supporting and hosting Hamas. So much to consider of all of that. Let's get more with the person that I just quoted, Anne Hertzberg, who's a legal advisor of the NGO Monitor, which is a Jerusalem-based research institute. Anne, appreciate your time. You're on the National Pulse.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. So you've made some thoughts and comments about South Africa's role in this, and perhaps I'll give you the opportunity to articulate that. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think when we look at this case, there's undoubtedly collaboration with Hamas. As I'm aware, Hamas was just in the country last week, representatives of Hamas, and they were there also in, I believe, November or December after the October 7 attacks. And so it calls into question exactly, who is South Africa aligning with? Who's actually paying for these proceedings? Is it Hamas? Is it Iran? Is it Qatar? Is it Malaysia? Is it some other country? Muslim Brotherhood? So I think these are all things that need to be investigated.
Okay, but I mean, besides being investigated, and I'm aware that some representatives of Hamas were in South Africa last week, but, people can come and go all the time, and I get that part. What I'm saying, do you have proof to confirm what you're suggesting, that South Africa is taking the orders from another source, from another boss?
I'm not sure if they're taking orders, but it certainly appears they're collaborating based on timing and the fact that Hamas representatives are coming into the country. And certainly, Hamas, relations with Hamas are sanctioned by many countries. There are many sanctions mechanisms, certainly in the United States, to block partnerships with Hamas and other potential relations. So I believe the U.S. government and other countries, the UK perhaps, Germany, should investigate South Africa and exactly look into what is going on here. Why is South Africa spearheading these proceedings?
And what form of investigation should that be?
Well, I think it should look at who's paying for these proceedings. The gallery was quite full on the South African side, and typically many of those people are paid to attend the proceedings. The South African legal team is also quite large, and I will mention that there are several representatives from NGOs that are allied with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine terrorist group, helping South Africa in its legal case. So they certainly should be looking at those ties, and they can look at travel records and other things to determine what exactly is going on here.
Are you saying overall that in spite of, and you would know this, that South Africa, rightfully or wrongfully, has been consistent in its support of the Palestinians from the time of Nelson Mandela, and that's been well documented, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu, people who are Nobel Prize winners. But are you saying at this point in time South Africa are effectively a proxy for others, and they are using South Africa to achieve their own ends?
Well, I appreciate South Africa's support for the Palestinians, and there's certainly nothing wrong with supporting the Palestinians. But what I would take issue with is the supporting of seemingly Hamas, because this intense advocacy on behalf of the Palestinians, this using of international justice mechanisms, has occurred now after October 7th, after a horrible massacre of Israelis and many other foreign nationals. And also, we should mention that there are over 130 hostages still being held, mostly thought to be in the Rafah area. And South Africa said nothing about it in its pleading. So if they really care about human rights and the rights of people and the rights of Palestinians, they should want to end this conflict. But doing so requires the removal of Hamas, not hosting them in their country.
Okay, so you've asked for an investigation. You've also, I understand, asked for actual sanctions against South Africa. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair. South Africa calls for the same thing all the time against Israel. I attend meetings at the UN quite frequently, and South Africa is often one of the most vociferous voices there against Israel. And I think countries, should start paying a closer attention. It's unfortunate. I think South Africa is a beautiful country. I've been to South Africa. I love the country. But unfortunately, I think the government has been taking the people of South Africa down a very dangerous and strange path in recent years.
And the nature of the sanctions that you're calling for, explain the nature and which countries should apply sanctions against South Africa.
Well, I think these sanctions could take several forms. If there are particular government officials that are closely working with Hamas, those officials could be sanctioned. It could take the form of visa restrictions. It could take the form of financial sanctions. These are just some of the things that could be done.
Just the last thing, you're saying that Hamas continues to, and I'm quoting, to weaponize the ICJ via South Africa, and the ICJ continues to allow it. That's if the first part is an opinion, the second part is an opinion, but comes across for me as a fact to you. Why would you say that the ICJ allows it?
Well, the ICJ certainly, and they did do it the last round. This is, I believe, the fourth time now that South Africa is trying to get measures imposed on Israel by the court. And it is within the court's discretion to not entertain South Africa's machinations. So they had very lengthy hearings in January. The parties are presenting reports on a periodic basis to the court. The court has fixed the schedule for pleadings in the case for both sides when they can present their cases in full. And South Africa keeps trying to get these additional hearings, and the court doesn't have to entertain it, but they are allowing it to happen.
Just lastly, in 10 seconds, what should the court do then? Throw it out? Throw the application out?
Personally, I don't think there's merit to the application, but the court has set the schedule, and so I think the court can stick with the schedule that it's already set, and that's when they'll hear the case. But they don't need to keep entertaining these rounds every few weeks with oral arguments, wasting everyone's time, rehashing the same information and in hearing the same false claims over and over again.
And that's where we have it. Anne Herzberg, thanks for your time. Legal advisor of NGO Monitor, a Jerusalem-based research institute. We'll get further comment from the ICJ, the Israeli testimony today later on, including chatting to Professor Chris Landsberg, who will comment on the questions and the conversation we've just had. Let's get the news headlines now. Here's Madubi.
Thanks, Mr. Garda, and a very good afternoon. In your headlines, the IEC says 13 political parties received over 172 million rand in donations in the fourth quarter of the financial year. Western Cape Premier Alan Winde says now that the George Building Collapse rescue and recovery operation has concluded, they'll do whatever they can to ensure that those involved are held accountable. And football's governing body FIFA has called on players to raise their hands and make a cross hands gesture to report racist abuse during games. Details of these and other stories, 4 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
A very good afternoon. Heavy traffic on the N1 North through Midrand. It's a crash at Samrand Road, and traffic already with Friday afternoon's volumes backlogging through to Buccleuch interchange. If you're on your way out of Joburg through to Pretoria, the N1 looking heavy at least as far as that Samrand exit. Coming out of Pietermaritzburg down to Durban, there's a big backlog of traffic down towards Market Road. That is the crash around the Market exit. Traffic parking all the way back sort of to New England Road territory. Durban's N2, Umgeni Road to Spaghetti Junction going south stays slow. Should start to ease up. No obstruction, just an additional lane closure. And Cape Town, the M5 looking heavy today, already queuing from the N2 Rondebosch side up through Maitland to the Kuiper interchange. With your traffic updates, I'm Rob Byrne.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.6 FM in Palabora. This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
Well, to me, it seems like every day there's a World Cup somewhere or the other.
Yeah.
In all sports. Now, tell us the latest one.
Well, this time around, we're talking all things the 2027 Women's World Cup. And President of the Brazilian Football Federation, Arnaldo Rodrigues, says that winning the rights to host the Women's World Cup is victory for women's football in South America and the world. This will be the first time South America hosts the tournament. And for the first time, the hosts were decided by open vote. There won't be any shortage of talent, obviously, on the pitch in 2027, but Brazil will be without one of their greats, Marta, who has 6 World Cup appearances as she has already retired. Meanwhile, Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp says that he will not forget a single day of his time in charge of the Reds as he prepares to bring the curtain down on Liverpool's reign. The Reds boss will take charge of Liverpool for the last time at Anfield on Sunday, and he says that he's already started saying his goodbyes to the staff and players at the training ground.
Yesterday, the players said goodbye in their way. We had a little barbecue here. It was really nice. The day before yesterday, I was with the staff of Chapel Street. It was really, really nice. Sunny the stadium after that. I had very emotional moments, of course, in between. But it's a lot to do as well. I'm not sure, but as there were a few, let me say like that, I'm not sure if not everybody has now one. But it's all part of the thing. Look, saying goodbye, I don't think is ever nice, but saying goodbye without feeling sad or feeling hurt or whatever, that would just mean that the time you spent together was not right and not great. And we had a great time. So it was.
I can only imagine how emotional it's going to get at Anfield on Sunday.
I must tell you, as a Man United fan, Jurgen Klopp's influence on Liverpool has been immense.
Absolutely.
And we forget that 10 years ago, that big club was in the doldrums, a bit like where Man United are now. Meaning, again, the key thing, and even for Kaiser Chiefs supporters, just to make the point, the most important signing a football club can make, in fact, any sports,
is
right?
the coach.
Get the right coach.
And
get a champion coach, you'll have a champion team.
One thing for sure is that we're also going to miss his charismatic side as a coach. But yeah, I wonder who is going to come in that hot seat at Liverpool. Well, still staying with football, the race continues this weekend as far as the CAF Champions League is concerned between Orlando Pirates and Stellenbosch, looking to book their spots, obviously. And as things stand, Steve Barker's side are in the driving seat in second place with 50 points, while Jose Rivera's team is third position with 49 points. And this weekend, we'll see Stellies host Sundowns at Athlone Stadium tomorrow at 3 p.m. And at the same hour, TS Galaxy will be at home to Orlando Pirates at the Bombela Stadium. And then that battle for the CAF Champions League spot will conclude next weekend. In golf, world number 1, Scottie Scheffler is facing 4 charges following his arrest outside the PGA Championship this morning. Scheffler was charged with second-degree assault on a police police officer a felony along with lesser charges of third-degree criminal mischief, reckless driving and disregarding signals from officers directing traffic. Now, the story is that he tried to drive past a police officer while driving around a crash scene. But with my understanding, he is being released from jail. In rugby, Reniel Hugo will captain a Sharks team featuring 14 changes for the clash against Cardiff in Durban tomorrow, as a host of senior players have been rested for next week's Challenge Cup final. The match 23 features Springboks in Skhumbuzo Noche, Apiwe Njanki and Cohen Bosch, surrounded by journeymen and promising youngsters. In tennis, Iga Swiatek swept past Coco Gauff to reach the Rome Open final, where Aryna Sabalenka will stand in her way for a third title and her bid to match Serena Williams' record. Swiatek eased to a 6-4 and 6-3 win, while Sabalenka defeated Danielle Collins 7-5 and 6-2. Then anything's off with women in sports. It's also the last day of the Women's Super League tomorrow. Two teams in the trophy race is Chelsea and Manchester City. City are looking to lift their first trophy since 2016, while Chelsea is looking to lift their 7th trophy and 5th consecutive one. So it'll be interesting to see which team is going to win, because currently Chelsea is sitting top and City second, but they both level on 52 points. With that said, it is a wrap from my side for now. I'll have more in the next hour for SAFM Sport. I'm Dumin Khabe.
I mean, here's a quick thought. How can golfers get arrested? I mean, that should be, footballers, I don't know, rugby, golfers.
It's quite interesting,
American
right?
football.
Someone was saying actually on social media that Scotty got arrested today because the police officer didn't know who he was.
Oh, my God, yeah. Well, a hole in one, something along that line, yeah. All right, we'll have more sport in an hour.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Who would have thought that a cancelled flight could lead to an unlikely night of drunken airport cloth between strangers? The priceless look on their faces when they discover that they took the term love your neighbor seriously? Okay. Some may describe it as a sexy, messy comedy drama about morality, monogamy, and everything in between. But we call it Cheaters. Catch Cheaters, Monday to Wednesday from the 15th of May at 9 p.m. only on S3. Channel your best comedy with BBC Primetime only on S3. Open up.
Hello, your choice hotline.
Hi, I need you to help me make a choice.
Well, with Ford, you get to make your own choices. Like on a new Ford Ranger, Ford Puma, Ford Everest, and the Ford Tornado bus. There's a flexible deal for every budget at your nearest Ford dealership today. Limited time offer. Your Ford, your choice. T&Cs apply.
The Smiling One and the Red Devils have a mammoth task to demonstrate who will dance to the second leg of the final. This is the North African Derby. 4-time champions confront 11-time champions in the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League final. Experience the jubilation of African football. Esperance Sportif de Tunis clashes with Al Ahly FC, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. This Saturday, 18 May at 8:45 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
So I started the show with a That's My Point feature, and I argued for the fact that adults who's never been taught a vernacular language in school, there must be some campaign that we need to do now, because you're having generation after generation, including myself, where, we can say a few words, string a line or two, but honestly, that hasn't changed much with understanding vernacular languages. So that's my point. What's yours? Pooty has got a thought. Hi, Pooty.
Hi, Ashraf. How are you?
Yeah, very good indeed. Good of you to connect. Go ahead.
Good. Not complaining. Ashraf, I just want to make probably one point that's more important.
Yeah.
I think we must move away from a culture of sort of shifting things that should be coming out of the home onto other organizations or even government. I mean, for an example, I think the government should be strategizing on prioritizing making sure their populace can read and write adequately. I think they must be patting themselves on the back if people are even able to express their ideas coherently. But out of the home is where the languages need to be taught. out of the home is where we need to make sure that we're providing that sort of support. I mean, at school level, it should only be there to sort of supplement what is already being taught, especially when it comes to vernacular languages. A lot of the minutiae and the context that you find is literally within just your surroundings and the people that you speak to. So it would be great to have these sort of programs, but unless they are geared towards, especially in our South African context, geared towards economic activities, I think the basis really should start that, you know, the government should be doing reading and writing, and we should be taking responsibility as family units.
Okay, but Puti, here's the thought very quickly. What I'm saying, my point of difference is I'm specifically talking about vernacular languages that need to be learned by people who are not, let's say, Black African, okay? So I'm talking about that. I'm talking about a whole generation, 30 years of democracy, where the vast majority can't string more than a word or two of these languages. And I'm saying that can't be taught at home, and therefore a program, and I'm not suggesting government must do it, but it could well be you and I. I mean, somebody, because I'm guilty of it as myself. I'm vulnerable to that. I'm saying we need to make that point, yeah. All right, but maybe
that point is very important. Thank you so much.
Think of a good idea. Let's see how we can do it. Puti, thanks for that. Thanks for that call. Much appreciated. Right. So earlier on, you know, we had a chat with Anne Hertzberg, the legal advisor of NGO Monitor. She was referring to the Israeli response to South Africa's presentation yesterday at the ICJ. Now we're going to take that story a bit further on. You may be aware that the Israeli minister, the Deputy Attorney General, let's get that right, the Deputy Attorney General for International Law from the Ministry of Justice of Israel, that's Gilad Noam, he said certain things early on in response to South Africa's position yesterday. So we're going to play some clips, pick up what he says, and maybe comment thereafter.
Would be to suggest, shockingly, that the most fundamental right afforded to all states should be withheld from one. This is an unthinkable outcome that would tell Israeli citizens and the hostages that they are not deserving of protection, of life itself, and tells the Israeli state that it will be treated unequally in a manner that is at odds with the most basic of legal principles. Israel is acutely aware of the large number of civilians that are concentrated in Rafah. It is also acutely aware of Hamas's efforts to use these civilians as a shield. That is why its battalions are present there. That is why its rockets are there. That is why hostages are there. We do not wish harm to these civilians, as Hamas does. That is precisely why Israel is taking steps to try and contend with the massive complexity that such a situation presents. That is why there has not been a large-scale assault on Rafah, but rather specific, limited and localized operations prefaced with evacuation efforts and support for humanitarian activities. Does Israel face complex operational challenges in Gaza? Certainly. But can we imagine a situation where a state does not take military action to protect its civilians when they are under fire? And can we imagine a court of law telling a state that the law prevents it from defending itself from attack? This is simply untenable. When I last stood at this podium in January, Israeli hostages, yet the hostages have now been in captivity for over 7 months. More than 130 children, women and men, including the sick and elderly, have now been held in Gaza for 224 days, incommunicado and in inhumane conditions. Among them is 23-year-old Hirsch Goldberg Pauling. Hirsch was abducted from the Nova Music Festival in Re'im, severely injured. On 25th April 2024, Hamas released a video of Hirsch. In it, he is seen with an amputated arm, which was blown off by Hamas terrorists. He is alive. He needs medical treatment. At least 36 of those who were taken hostage on October 7 have been confirmed dead, and their bodies are still held in the Gaza Strip. Among them are Yossi Sharabi, a 53-year-old father of three, and Itai Svirsky, who is 38-year-old. Both of them were kidnapped from their homes in Be'eri. On 14 January 2024, in a display of pure and unadulterated cruelty, Hamas made public a video of the two and of a third hostage, 26-year-old Noah Argamani, who was also kidnapped from the music festival, promising to announce on the following day which of the three are alive. Shortly thereafter, it was confirmed that Yossi and Itai had both been killed after 102 days in brutal captivity. Additional information regarding hostages still held by Hamas can be found at tab 3 of your judges folder. It remains unclear how many more innocent victims have been killed at the hands of Hamas. Simply put, this situation is unconscionable. It is unbearable for the parents to watch videos of their young daughters bruised and bleeding paraded before cheering crowds in Gaza. And we have heard harrowing accounts told by survivors released from Gaza of the torture and sexual violence they suffered at the hand of their captors. And it is intolerable for a nation obligated to defend its citizens and wishing for their return. This court has called for the immediate release of the hostages, but to no avail. It is Israel's right and obligation to defend them and all its citizens from the evil that was unleashed on them on 7th October and since then. Any state would do the same. Mr. President, members of the court, I next turn to the second fact that must be kept in mind. Hamas, with whom Israel is engaging in this armed conflict, is not a party to these proceedings. Israel is engaged in an intense armed conflict with a ruthless jihadist terrorist organization, one that is not only targeting Israeli civilians, but is also using Palestinian civilians to shield itself, in utter disregard for their lives or for the law. By exploiting the Genocide Convention, South Africa is suggesting a convoluted reading of international law, under which any armed conflict could be brought before the court. It seeks, once again, to obtain provisional measures that would bind only Israel and not its adversary. The absurd result would be that Israel would be denied its inherent right to defend itself. Hamas, for its part, would remain free to continue committing its horrific crimes. The purpose of the Genocide Convention is not to have the court supervise the conduct of armed hostilities by parties to the conflict, by the assertion of the genocide. Rather, the Convention, and subsequently this court's jurisdiction, is limited to the grave crime of genocide. I am compelled to restate once again that there is a tragic war going on, but there is no genocide. Yet, particularly at the provisional measure stage, when the evidentiary threshold is such that the applicant is not required to provide proof of its allegations or the existence of specific intent to commit genocide.
That's Gilad Noam responding at the ICJ today in response to South Africa's presentation yesterday. Calls, comments, 0614 104 107 via WhatsApp. Otherwise, I'll take your calls, 086 000 2032. And wherever you are in the country or whether you're listening online, you can also comment just using that hashtag, the National Pulse. Tag me, Ashraf Garda, tag SFM Radio. We'll pick it up.
SAFM.
Hear that? That's the sound of deliciousness in your kitchen after watching Ready Steady Cook. You don't season the same no more. The way you chop, slay. You do it with so much flair, because you've channeled your Salt Bay. Uyashisa. Turn up the heat. Off the bone with the meat. You're in your kitchen prime. Always dishing on time. Need I serve more? Catch Ready Steady Cook weekdays at 7 p.m. on S3 and channel your inner 5-star chef. Channel a better you with S3.
Mama Kiti, I heard Rand Water talking on the radio about how dangerous it is for people to encroach on their pipeline servitude.
Yes, those high-pressure Rand Water pipelines are under the ground distributing megaliters of water. When people build on top of the pipeline, Rand Water is unable to conduct maintenance on the pipeline, which has a negative impact on water provision. Pipelines can burst without warning. People could get seriously injured or worse.
Yes, people can die from a bursting pipe. That is why people need to understand that Rand Water servitude is where a Rand Water pipeline is located. If we build our houses or businesses on a Rand Water servitude, then we are encroaching on that servitude. They say if communities want to know whether they've encroached over servitudes, they should look for the Rand Water beacons.
The beacons indicate the presence of Rand Water pipelines under the ground. They're rectangular, made of concrete, are painted either white or blue, and have the Rand Water logo on them.
Let's take a walk around our area to see if there are any Rand Water beacons so that we can also tell the neighbors.
Rand Water, celebrating 120 years of existence and still finding new ways to provide clean, portable bulk water.
The Royal Club want to deliver a top-of-the-range style of football to impress their fans on home ground. However, the Orange Boys want to add to their 2-1 lead and rule Cairo for the duration of the match. This is the second leg of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup final. Do not miss out on the North African derby, Zamalek Sporting Club versus RSP Bekane FC, live on SABC Sport on TTT Channel 4. This Sunday, 19 May at 18:45. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
We'll get Chris Landsberg to respond to the Israeli position today, just after the news at 4 o'clock. But right now, let's get to the ongoing trial of the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. You may know that accused number 5 in the trial is denied through his defense counsel, Sandile Mshololo, that he made contact with the singer Kelly Khumalo. Let's get a complete update on what's happened today, as always, with somebody who knows more than anybody else regarding the issue, Pearl Magubani. Thank you, Pearl. Hi. Pearl, hi.
Good afternoon, Ashraf, and to the listeners.
Yes, good afternoon. Right, so give us an update on what's happened today, Pearl.
Well, today we went through a cross-examination of Gideon Host, the cell phone expert. He was asked about several phone calls that were allegedly made from a phone that belongs to Swisoko Nduli, who is accused number 5. Now, Nduli, denies the fact that his number contacted singer Kelly Khumalo, who has been fingered as the mastermind by 2 of the accused via confession statements. What these statements are in dispute by the defense. But, he denies the saying that is not his number. And these phone calls happened around August 2014 and October, the month that Meyiwa was shot and killed.
And anything else that you need to share from today?
Well, there's been several statements that have been supplied by hosts to the defense, and they've been admitted as evidence. However, the judge has advised, because it's quite a heavy pack with lots of digits and cell phone numbers, that they peruse through, both the state and the defense peruse through that evidence and then come back on Monday just to, outline what is most important instead of going through the entire dossier.
Anything else? What's expected on Monday then?
So it's just going to be host then, and then we need to hear from a Vodacom expert about verifying the numbers that are said to be, belong to the accused, and as well as verify the number of a person named Lungisani Ndwandwe, who they claim is a relative, and not that he's the one that made the several phone calls and not the accused.
Okay, if you've got further things to add, that's fine. Others, we'll leave it at that and we'll talk on Monday.
All right.
Perfect. Pearl Magumani certainly covering the story on behalf of the SABC, as she's always done. The ongoing Senzo Meyiwa murder trial, at some stage, it will come to an end. Let's get to some of your calls and comments on some of the big issues that we've raised all throughout the show, because really that's what we do on the show. We reflect and we certainly move the national pulse. So I think it's Omar, hope I've got that right, Omar in Pretoria. Hi, Omar.
Hi, Ashraf. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. You're live on the National Pulse, so go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the issue of the refugee centers.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to commend the minister. However, I still feel the minister is coming very late because, yes, I do understand that there was a whistleblower who gave them a light, but it has always been in the air that there is this corruption taking place, and that should have taken a hit on that one to go and check these refugee centers. But I want to congratulate the minister and the hard work that he's on. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Nice call. I think, well, you did say very late, but I hear you as well. Then, the issue they now raised about languages, here's some comment.
Good day, Ashraf. How's it? This is Sake here in East London. Look, I stayed most of my life in Durban. In fact, I've only been in East London for some months. But in the months that I've been here, I've noticed how white people in East London are more prone and likely to speak isiXhosa than what I've seen Durban with versus white or Indian people, how prevalent it is for them to speak vernacular. But if you go to areas like Verulam, there's a high number of people, Indian people, who speak a lot of vernacular languages. I think it has a lot to do with integration, because here in East London there's so much integration between white and black people, but I know not perfectly so, but the integration helps.
Well, you just made the point. The integration helps. That's why it may be more natural now, but for those who've missed the boat, do we just ensure that we miss the boat forever? That's really the basis of my conversation there, right? There's another.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. I think what you just mentioned now is a good idea, because you can see most of the white people who doesn't understand our African languages, when they're among us, or one of them is among us as Africans, because for us it's much easier. I can speak Sotho, Xhosa, Zulu, Tswana, Venda. They feel uncomfortable. They think sometimes maybe you are gossiping about them. It's a matter of just being free so that they can also express themselves. I think that one for them to understand our African languages, that will help them so that they cannot feel isolated or maybe taken otherwise. Thank you. That's Pastor from Leisburg, my brother.
Thanks, Pastor. Nice call. Well, I mean, here it is, besides the thing that you're talking about, and the practice when we understand each other, when we know each other with the languages, we understand each other so much more. We understand what makes us click, what connects our pulses together in many ways, isn't it? So maybe it's a conversation of how do we do it. Think about that. Let's get the news now. It's 4 o'clock. In the news hot seat, as always, is Mudupi.
Thank you very much, Ntate Garda. The top stories, figures on political party funding are released, and Windy maps the way forward regarding the George disaster. A very good afternoon. Starting with election news, the IEC says 13 political parties received over 172 million rand in donations in the fourth quarter of the financial year. The IEC report covers the period from the 1st of January to the 31st of March this year. For the first time since the inception of the Party Funding Act, the declared value of donations surpassed the 100 million rand mark in a quarter. Zoleka Kodashe reports.
The DA declared the highest number of donations for the fourth quarter at over 65 million rand, whilst Roger Jardine's Change Starts Now, which won't be participating in the May 29 polls, received over 35 million rand. The IFP received a 20 million rand donation from the Oppenheimer family, whilst the ANC, which got over 16 million rand, and Songezo Zibi's Rise Mzansi declared over 15 million rands. The EFF declared over 2 million rands in donations from companies associated with Patrice Motsepe. Zoleka Kotashe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Last week, meanwhile, the Electoral Court handed down judgment in a matter involving the Commission and 496 registered political parties that failed to account for their income. 6 parties were fined for failing to comply. There were fined amounts ranging from 10,000 to 40,000 rand. Western Cape Premier Alan Winde says now that the George Building Collapse rescue and recovery operations have concluded, they will do whatever they can to ensure that those involved are held accountable. The Western Cape government started its own investigation shortly after the incident last week and appointed a structural engineer to assist. Winde says an update will be provided in due course. Earlier today, the local government MEC Anton Bradell confirmed the numbers of people involved in the collapse. 62 people were on the building site when the collapse occurred. 34 were successfully rescued, while 33 passed away. Social Development in the Western Cape has condemned what appears to be targeted attacks on social workers in Khayelitsha. A community development worker was shot and hijacked, while a social worker was hijacked during separate incidents in Khayelitsha this week. Minister in the department, Shana Fernandez, says this brings to 5 the number of attacks on staffers since the beginning of the year. She says it has become more difficult to deliver services without a police escort in some of the townships there.
These attacks not only leave our colleagues deeply traumatized, but it also hampers service delivery to many vulnerable residents in the community. I have been in contact with the victim of Wednesday's incident, and he is angry that he was attacked while trying to do good for the community. It cannot be that staff who are trying to make a positive change in communities are falling prey to callous criminals.
And football's governing body, FIFA, has called on players to raise their hands and to make a cross-hands gesture to report racist abuse during games. The message is intended to make it easier for referees and officials to take action. It's also pushing for racism to be recognized as a criminal offense in every country. FIFA President Gianni Infantino.
There is no reason whatsoever we should today discriminate anyone based on his race or anything else. This is simply not admissible. And if it is a problem of society, and if society cannot deal with it, well, let's deal with it in football, once and for all.
The top story at 4 o'clock, the IEC says 13 political parties received over 172 million rand in donations in the fourth quarter of the financial year. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemeli.
And coming up in your sports this hour, Van der Dussen to captain Proteas side in T20 series against West Indies, and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc fastest in Imola first practice. More details at 4:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
A very good afternoon. The M1 going north through Midrand stays busy as far as Samrand Road. That's a collision scene that happened earlier today. Pick up the queues there about Buccleuch. Now, very, very significant backlogs heading to the airport from Pretoria. The roadworks at both Clayville and Tembisa. The queues before you get to Olifantsfontein, and it extends right the way down to Bapsfontein Road. It is heavy. If you're leaving the airport going to Pretoria, there's roadworks around that Bapsfontein exit, and that's pretty heavily backed as well. But it's the southbound side, airport-bound side, that that is heavy. Now, leaving Pietermaritzburg, the earlier crash that we had on your way towards Durban, that has been cleared. The N3 South moving nicely at Market Road. Spaghetti Junction from Umgeni Road on the N2, that's all looking pretty good as well. And Cape Town, the M5 northbound, queuing up through Maitland towards the Kubo interchange. N2 out of town through Somerset West. Earlier crash at the Gans Park area has been cleared, and it's not too bad for a Friday as you head through Somerset West towards St Lowry's. With your traffic update, I'm Rob Byrne.
Stay safe on the roads. SAFM is with you.
Rise to the occasion with Season 5 of The Taste Master SA, Tuesday evenings at 7 on SABC2. Follow the delicious journey as 14 of the country's best baking talents compete to impress the judges and claim the title. Only one will be crowned the Taste Master and win the grand prize valued at more than 400,000 Rand. That's Tuesdays at 7, repeat Wednesdays at 1 and Sundays at 4 p.m. on SABC2.
The Democratic Alliance is on a mission to rescue South Africa. Together with the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa, we have a real chance to bring in a new government that works. We can turn things around, but we cannot do it without you. In this election, the stakes are simply too high. Every single vote is going to count. A strong DA can rescue South Africa. Join the rescue mission on the 29th of May. Vote DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned. The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
Established in 1904, 120 years later, they're lifting their first ever Bundesliga title. Bayer Leverkusen finally made it. Yet, they still want to close the curtain with a win. While FC Augsburg intend to play their hearts out and finish the race with victory. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch the champs of the 2023-2024 season, Bayer Leverkusen versus FC Augsburg on Saturday, 18 May at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The SABC Fortune Combo radio stations, which includes SAFM, Lotus FM, and Radio 2000, seek the services of a freelance graphic designer who will collaborate with cross-functional teams to create visually compelling assets that align with our receptive brand identities and resonate with our target audiences. The minimum requirements for the position are a bachelor's degree or diploma in graphic design, visual arts, or related field, 2 to 4 years proven experience as a graphic designer with a strong portfolio showcasing a range of design projects. All interested candidates should submit their CVs and portfolio of evidence to vacancy@safm.co.za. Application closed on the 26th of May 2024. For more detailed info, visit www.safm.co.za or follow us on our social media pages at SAFM Radio. SAFM, leading the conversation.
Hello, South Africans. The African People's Convention is participating in the 2024 elections nationally and provincially. We urge all South Africans to vote APC for service delivery, to fight against corruption, hunger, poverty, and unemployment. The APC will abolish the corruption policy of denying employment to those who are 36 years and above. The APC will protect and guarantee their right to be employed in government. On the 29th of May 2024, vote APC. Vote for Themba Godi to go back to Parliament.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Well, we can debate all day what is the big issue that reflects the national pulse. What is not in debate is that we move the national pulse. So welcome to the show, The National Pulse on SAFM Radio. My name's Ashraf Garda. If you just tuned in, well, you should have been hosting the show for about 6 weeks now. So very much in the hot seat and really enjoying the engagements that we have with you every single day. Love the great feedback we get as well. Now, talking about feedback, one of the biggest issues of the last 2 days has been the issue of South Africa once again presenting at the ICJ, calling on for another emergency action to be taken against Israel, this time specifically referring to the positions of the attacks on Rafah, right? Israel responded as per the rules at the ICJ today. You may have heard we've played some sound, and you can pick up the sound earlier on. We also had a chat to Anne Hertzberg, and I'm going to play some of my conversation with her pretty shortly. But before that, let's get some comment. Let's get your comment, because we love the fact all around the country, whatever the views are, you have views and we engage. And that's the type of democracy that we cherish on air in our country. So here's some comments.
Good day, guys. This is Bongane from East London. I'm very concerned. I have a serious question. Your guest right now, who is questioning the intentions of South Africa, do they really don't see that Israel is actually, there's a plausibility of a genocide happening in Rafah, Gaza? Or is this just politics? Because to me, do they really believe this Hamas thing, or is it just politics? Because I'm really concerned. I'm also just not sure anymore.
Well, I mean, I think you raise an interesting point. The one thing I can tell you now about what's happened in that region from October 7 onwards, even forget even before that, it's almost like one part of the world sees the sun has risen and the other one says it's nightfall. There's like nothing in between that. It's just like, for the one, it's just crazy that it's nighttime and you're saying it's daytime, and vice versa. Somehow we will reconcile that soon. Let's get to some of the calls now. Imbawana in Mafikeng, you're live with the National Pulse. Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Yeah, good. Go ahead.
Let me start by saying Hamas is not terrorist group. Hamas is a resistance group. Why so? Shimon Peres, when he arrived in Palestine as a refugee, he did not have the right to be a leader in Palestine. So the Israelis who are in Palestine, they don't have the power that they're claiming. So Hamas is not a terrorist group. It's a resistance group which are fighting what they are doing.
Okay, I hear you, and I think many people would concur with you that a situation where there's conquest of land will breed opposition in defense. The ANC is a classic example of that, and so would be the PAC and AZAPO and many others. Having said that, would you say in any way that what Hamas they have done on October the 7th is an act of terror?
What Hamas are doing is similar to what the ANC was doing to liberate people of South Africa. And the same group of people were calling the ANC the terrorists.
Okay, got that. Thank you for that call in Bawana. Let's get another opinion, and we crisscross the country from Mafikeng in the northwest. We go to the coast, Durban. Mike in Durban, hi.
Hello, Ashraf.
Yeah,
Ashraf,
Mike.
Nice show.
Thank you.
I just want to say that it's my opinion, what I want to say, and I appreciate getting this time. Israel and Gaza war started long before the 7th of October, and it's very sad. If you're a South African, and if you've got to be at the age of 55 and over to have understood what the apartheid was all about. So South Africa has an obligation to put themselves into this picture. And really what's going on in Gaza, no journalists are allowed, no international journalists are allowed to cover this war in the region, and they silence Al Jazeera, and there's so much of propaganda and lies. Even they had nothing to defend themselves today. And these rapes and all of these they talk about has not been proven.
So, I mean, look, something certainly happened on October the 7th. I'm not going to go into the detail, but something happened. Some of it is true and some of it is untrue. But do you think that, in the context of your call, do you think South Africa is being deliberately vilified by many others who are not supportive of the South African position?
It's an obligation that South Africa has. It's an apartheid state. I mean, it's open. The whole world knows that. The only people support them are the leaders of the Western world. But the people on the ground don't support them. And this is a sad story. And they have the power to silence you. They have the power to sanction you. They have the power to do everything. This is the biggest problem we are having. And I'm so glad. I'm very proud of South Africa, what they've done.
Okay, Mike, that you've certainly raised an important point. Thank you for your call. And again, the diversity of calls are there with people expressing different opinions. In fact, you can also tweet out if you like. Use the hashtag #TheNationalPulse, and you can also comment on our Facebook page because we sort of streaming live. In fact, on both platforms. So besides listening, 104 to 107 nationwide, you can catch us on streaming live and on YouTube all around the country, all around the world. In fact, talking about the world, here's another comment.
Hi, Ash.
Wait, let me get to this one about, again, the issues about the Middle East.
Afternoon, SAFM. You're speaking to Chosi Bush here in Rondapelt. My take on this Israel and Palestine issue, I think we need international peacekeepers to go down on the ground and try to resolve this. Meaning that the Palestinian soldiers will have to go back to, the Israel soldiers will have to go back to Israel, and then they will have to leave Gaza and other spaces that they are occupying, and then the international peacekeepers, they take control of that, listening to the arguments done by the representatives or the lawyers of the Israel today in court. So yeah, because really we cannot accept that Israel will continue killing women and children there, and then while they are also pointing out that they have the right to defend their citizens. So it's a tricky one. International peacekeepers, I say. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, here's the point. I know many people, I'm of the opinion, the issue didn't start on October 7th. It certainly started a long, long time before Balfour Declaration. I've tweeted about that. That's the first point. The second point is, yes, I think one can contest what happened on October 7th. South Africa's position, in fact, is they have been critical of Hamas on October 7th. And that's clear. They have been critical, okay? Not of everything they've done, but October 7th they've been critical, okay? Having said that, how then, assuming that they were wrong, let's just say assuming that Hamas were wrong on October 7th, how then do you justify the annihilation of what comes across as an entire nation? That's really the gist of the issue. And as opposed to saying, I don't like what happened on October 7th, however, what's happened beyond that is just unthinkable, and the world seems to be standing. That's how I see it. And I'm just putting out an opinion, and you can certainly counter that or give me a thumbs up for that as well. We're going to speak about that with an expert right after this.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Count down the best 41 moments from the last decade of Top Gear every Friday at 9 p.m. from the 3rd of May with Richard Hammond. Throwback to James May, aka Captain Slow, driving up an active volcano. The team goes on an epic supercar road trip through Romania and the unmasking of the Stig. I really thought he was malevolent. This is automotive action you simply cannot miss. Channel your inner Stig with BBC Primetime only on S3. Open up.
S3. Right, Frank Chikane was detained, tortured and poisoned by the apartheid government, but he never stopped fighting for freedom. In 1994, he flew in a helicopter over the endless lines of South Africans voting for the first time and said afterwards that what he saw was unimaginable. On May the 29th, the Kagiso Trust's Remember Me initiative encourages South Africans to honour Chikane's struggle by exercising the right he fought so hard for, the right to vote. #Remember Me.
You are listening to The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Right, we said we're going to play lots of the language issue calls that we raised, my points that are raised about that, so looking forward to that conversation. Now, we've had two different takes on what's happened today at the ICJ. Firstly, we've had a response from the Israeli point of view. Then we also had the voice of Anne Herzberg. What we do have now is Dr. Chris Landsberg, who's the chair of African Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Joburg. Chris, legal advisor of the NGO Monitor based in Jerusalem, and she has a particular position on South Africa in relation to what's happening at the ICJ. So I thought first let's play a bit of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. South Africa calls for the same thing all the time against Israel. I attend meetings at the UN quite frequently, and South Africa is often one of the most vociferous voices there against Israel. And I think countries, should start paying a closer attention. It's unfortunate. I think South Africa is a beautiful country. I've been to South Africa. I love the country. But unfortunately, I think the government has been taking the people of South Africa down a very dangerous and strange path in recent years.
And the nature of the sanctions that you're calling for, explain the nature and which countries should apply sanctions against South Africa.
Well, I think these sanctions could take several forms. You know, if there are particular government officials that are closely working with Hamas, those officials could be sanctioned. It could take the form of visa restrictions. It could take the form of financial sanctions. These are just some of the things that could be done.
Just the last thing you're saying that Hamas continues to, and I'm quoting, to weaponize the ICJ via South Africa, and the ICJ continues to allow it. I mean, that's if the first part is an opinion, the second part is an opinion, but comes across for me as a fact to you. Why would you say that the ICJ allows it?
Well, the ICJ certainly, and they did do it the last round. This is, I believe, the fourth time now that South Africa is trying to get measures imposed on Israel by the court. And it is within the court's discretion to not entertain South Africa's machinations. So they had very lengthy hearings in January. The parties are presenting reports on a periodic basis to the court. The court has fixed the schedule for pleadings in the case for both sides when they can present their cases in full. And South Africa keeps trying to get these additional hearings, and the court doesn't have to entertain it, but they are allowing it to happen.
Okay, that is the view of a person based in Jerusalem and Harrisburg. We do have with us Dr. Chris Landsberg. Chris, I mean, you've heard some of her comments, and particularly, and maybe this didn't come through in the actual sound, is this, right, that Hamas continues to weaponize the ICJ via South Africa. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you played that clip, Ashraf. I mean, I wasn't privy to it because I was just in meetings all day. What's so fascinating about that perspective? Now, I'm not sure whether the person is in civil society, a journalist.
Well, part of an NGO, the NGO Monitor.
Part of an NGO. Yeah. But what that person did is almost not just to articulate the verbatim argument that the Israeli contingent to the ICJ today presented, but went a step further. The Israeli contingent in the ICJ had a couple of main arguments, but the fascinating new one, which is now made explicit, is that South Africa is a proxy for Hamas. No evidence has been presented, not even in court. The statement was made, and this person goes further, and certainly the United States seems to be in this mood. United States Congress is punish the enemies of America, punish South Africa, punish those who support the enemies of America, including terrorist organizations like Hamas. Now, that's what the person is saying. Let me take the opportunity, Ashraf, just to almost introduce another topic. I actually think South Africa missed a brilliant opportunity last night. I think South Africa did a sterling job, and even though this person says South Africa, the court shouldn't entertain South Africa's quote-unquote machinations, the way she stated it verbatim. The court has not only entertained it, but the court has largely up to now found this in South Africa's favor, gave orders to Israel about what it should do, and it didn't do the same for South Africa, except the fact that South Africa, like Israel, must send regular updates on their view on the matter. And there was one judge today, it was very telling, who gave Israel until tomorrow to prove that they are in fact allowing openings for humanitarian aid to come out and that it didn't close the border. So the court is certainly entertaining South Africa's filing of the case, and Israel is participating in it. But let me tell you where South Africa missed a massive opportunity last night.
Okay, go
and
ahead.
I think this was choreographed. Ashraf.
Okay.
The UN Security Council hosted the families of hostages held by Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
I think South Africa should have been bold to join those 32 largely Western states, participate in that, and say we agree that hostages should be released, and also make the case for how they think the war should be ended in order to reinforce its non-aligned statement, because it's clear that Israel's tactic has changed from the first. They've learned lessons, and they're now going and almost painting South Africa as a sponsor of terrorism. That's the new tactic.
So in terms of Israel's tactic changing, you're saying South Africa needed to have adopted a slightly different tactic yesterday compared to before?
No. I just said an opportunity presented itself. Look, what South Africa is doing, and what is really now getting under the skin of the Israelis is that South Africa did not only take the world by surprise when it launched that first filing on the 29th of December, but South Africa is absolutely persistent. And the world is almost taken aback by South Africa's audacity and guts and bravery. And the fact that Egypt, Ashraf, Egypt decided to join South Africa.
Yeah.
That for me is an ominous warning that the prospect of what Israel is doing in Palestine could trigger a greater war, as was the case when they attacked the consulate of Iran. But for Egypt to join, right? These two parties have been involved in brutal wars before.
Yes.
There's a peace pact, and that thing is now clearly fragile and could break. But South Africa is persistent, and the court is certainly going to find in some aspects of in some of South Africa's demands, whether the court will rule that Israel should stop the war against Hamas, because that's a key point for Israel. That remains to be.
So, I mean, we've got about a minute. The last thing, I mean, the broader issue of genocide, that will take a good few years before there's resolution to that one, right? So what happened yesterday was South Africa effectively calling for a stop of what they saw as Israel aggression, now moving from that one part of Gaza now to specifically to Rafah. How do you think the ICJ would rule on that? Because it's a very narrow, straight, linear request.
No, but look, South Africa has changed its tune there to a more hardline one. The previous version, South Africa talked about genocidal intent. Now it openly says there's a genocide going on, effectively saying the Israelis, the Palestinians, were forced to move from north to south, cramped up, so that it could be obliterated, and there are no safe spaces. So South Africa is following this thing to the T. And let me tell you what the implication is, because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Ashraf, if nothing else, what South Africa is doing here is also putting international law on trial to see where the divisions will be, what the court will say, and in the long term, we will see the benefits of what South Africa has done, that no longer can Anglo-Saxon nations and countries like Israel with races with a particular melamine color be set not to be prone to commit acts of human rights. And that's a revolutionary overhaul of international relations.
And that's where we leave it, because I think that's the most important point that you've just said. Of the many other things, South Africa is putting international law on trial. Dr. Chris Landsberg, good chatting to you as always. I'm sure we'll have another chat sometime soon. Thank you for your time. Dr. Chris Landsberg, who's the Chair of African Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Johannesburg. Do you think that's true? South Africa is putting international law on trial. Let's get the news headlines with Madubi.
Thanks, Ashraf, and good afternoon. In your headlines, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's not losing sleep about the May 29th elections. The IEC says 13 political parties received over 172 million rand in donations in the fourth quarter of the financial year. And Russia's President Vladimir Putin says there are no plans for his troops to capture Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, at least for now. Details of these and other stories at 5.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
And we have a major delay alert for anyone that's moving between Pretoria and the airport. It's pretty extreme conditions on the R21. This roadworks at Clayville, approaching Olifantsfontein, which you'd probably be used to. You sat in that for months now. But the big change up today is additional lane closures going into the Bopsfontein exit down through Tembisa. So really it's a queue. You pick it up before Olifantsfontein and you don't get out of it until you've got down to that R25 exit. That's really quite extreme. People are trying to get out of that at Olifantsfontein and jamming up that off-ramp into Clayville, and then the Pretoria road that runs through Tembisa. So there's a whole pile of traffic. If you're coming from Pretoria for Fly Connection, make sure you've got plenty of time to get through. And then if you're going the other way to Pretoria, major backlogs from sort of Atlas Road territory right through to some roadworks as well by the Bopsfontein exit. Really significant delays there. The N1 through Midrand, busy today between Buccleuch and Samrand. Another crash coming out of Pietermaritzburg on your way to Durban, this one at Ashburton. So quite a big queue of traffic back to Market Road. And there's also a big pile-up of traffic going towards Ashburton from Linfield Park. That's a collision on that side as well. So very heavy both directions. Also a collision on the N2 North before the M7 Bluff exit. Traffic parking back as far as the cement factory on your way to Durban. That looks quite heavy. And Cape Town traffic all over the N7 northbound up through Lunga in towards Epping to Viking Way, and southbound quite a heavy queue going through Goodwood towards Voortrekker Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
Right, so Minister of Sport, let's talk cricket.
Yes, we start things off with cricket this hour. Rassie van der Dussen will captain a Proteas squad, which has been bolstered by 3 IPL players in a 3-match T20 series against West Indies. Gerald Coetzee, Quinton de Kock and Heinrich Nortje have been added to the squad for a series that precedes the T20 World Cup. And remember, van der Dussen was not selected for the T20 World Cup. And coach Rob Walters says that Rassie brings a wealth of experience in the side.
He's the captain. Yeah. Obviously, it just brings a wealth of experience in our group. It is a relatively inexperienced group, barring obviously the 3 guys who are arriving from the IPL. So, yeah, just a guy we feel will be good in the leadership space, especially with the squad here, and offer huge value given the T20 cricket he's been playing.
Then moving on to football as we build up to the last day of the Premier League with the trophy set to go down to the wire for Arsenal and Manchester City. A win for City over West Ham will be their 6th titles under Pep Guardiola, and it will mean that the team has an amazing 175 wins from 228 games, and their points per season will average under 93 points per season, while Arsenal are just a win away from winning 16 of their last 18 league games while they face Everton, and we're looking forward to that gold rush. Elsewhere, Arne Slot has reportedly signed his contract as new Liverpool head coach today. All documents are in place and the official announcement is expected soon, with some of his coaching staff still waiting work permits. Then all will be done and dusted. Then in motorsport, Ferrari's Charles Leclerc was fastest at the end of an incident-packed first practice session at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Leclerc was 0.104 seconds quicker than George Russell's Mercedes, with the second Ferrari of Carlos Sainz third, while Max Verstappen was 5th in that Red Bull car. In boxing news, Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture Zizi Godwa believes that he consulted enough before appointing the Boxing South Africa board this week. Godwa appointed a 7-member BSA board, making only 2 changes to the board that he appointed in December 2023. And here he is just explaining the 2 changes to the board.
2 names that were in the previous board were not nominated. Princess Mngoma as well as Dr. Sitati. they're quite good names. Quite good names, I must be honest. It's people who understand sport. It's people who understand, some of them legal. Some of the people are very strong when it comes to broadcasting right in relation to sporting right. People like Lux, which is the reason you brought them in, because sport globally, it has got to compete. And there are many other things now that are involved in sport. So I'm quite happy with this outcome. Generally, it has been accepted by the boxing family.
All right, then ending things off with the business of sport. Obviously, we're heading towards the end of this season's Premier League, and all the teams are set for a huge payday. And I was just like wondering how much each club is going to get at the end of the season. So each place in the Premier League is worth an estimated 71.4 million rand, and every team gets paid based on the position they finish at the end of the league. Last year, Man City won 1.4 billion rand. And Arsenal finishing second, they got 1.3 billion rand, and that prize money decreases by around 69 million rand for each position, with Southampton, who finished at the bottom, and they got that 71.4 million rand. And this amount is based on the number of times the game is shown on TV. So the higher your position, the more games are shown on TV, and you make more money.
And I can have it on good record, by the way, that when Man United do not play Champions League football, South African TV audiences for Champions League plummets. I'm not joking. Listen, it's a very interesting one there. I have to say this because the opportunity will disappear otherwise. So you mentioned the new coach, Arne Slot. So here's the big question. Will he slot in to do the type of work that Klopp did when his actions so aroused the cop? Can't say it again, just once. Thank you.
Well, that's it from my side. I'll have more in the next hour. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumi Khapele.
Who would have thought that a cancelled flight could lead to an unlikely night of drunken airport cloth between strangers? The priceless look on their faces when they discover that they took the term love your neighbor seriously? Okay. Some may describe it as a sexy, messy comedy drama about morality, monogamy, and everything in between. But we call it Cheaters. Catch Cheaters, Monday to Wednesday from the 15th of May at 9 p.m. only on S3. Channel your best comedy with BBC Primetime only on S3. Open up.
The Smiling One and the Red Devils have a mammoth task to demonstrate who will dance to the second leg of the final. This is the North African Derby. 4-time champions confront 11-time champions in the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League final. Experience the jubilation of African football. Esperance Sportif de Tunis clashes with Al Ahly FC live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 this Saturday, 18 May at 8:45 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, let's get to the markets with Paswani Mpatlele, who's the Senior Portfolio Manager at Markway Fund Managers. Paswani, great chatting to you. Let's get to local global markets, right?
Ashraf, and afternoon to you and all your listeners. Happy Friday, guys. Ashraf, we're looking at for a week where we saw a lot of gains. Markets are closing in the green. Markets, however, today pulled back some of the green following the momentum of the week as market participants are assessing the first cut, the timing of the first cut, especially at the time where we saw overnight almost over 3 Fed policy speakers in the US have aired concerns about the economic data hasn't given them confidence of having rates to be cut, and it's better to still continue holding. But markets continue to hold, Ashraf, to believe that the rates will be cut, especially on the back of the fact that they are seeing a cooling economy, looking through the eyes of a leading indicator such as the housing market in the US, which came in at a negative double-digit number compared to the prior month. Meanwhile, China also provided us with mixed data. We're looking at industrial productivity numbers that were up 6.7, better than the prior month and better than expected, as mining and manufacturing activity improved on government support, but retail sales were weak, reflecting concerns around China. Asset prices based on these developments, Ashraf, sees commodity prices continuing to do well. The dollar rebounded. Bond yields also followed through. And when you put this together as a picture, as a puzzle here, it's reflective of inflationary waves are still in play in the global economy, such as especially when you look at the US. We've seen the US markets when they opened, they were flat, but slightly in the green. When you look at the Dow, Nasdaq, or S&P, Europe was down slightly, with the FTSE down 0.1, DAX, CAC down 0.2. Locally, we've managed to recoup some of our losses. We're flat, but in the green, of 0.05, supported by gains out of the resource sector up 2%. Industrials were down 0.8, financials were down 0.1. In the commodity space, we see a mixed picture. Gold was up 1%, supported by the developments we saw today at 2,401, supported further by the going into a weekend where the geopolitical tensions are still heightened. Platinum was down 0.2 at $1,070 an ounce. Oil was up at $83.36 a barrel. When looking into the currency space, the rand continues to do well. Rand against the dollar is 18.18, rand against the euro 19.73, and rand against the pound 23.36. Ashraf.
Okay, that's it. Thank you for your time. We're going to chat next week. Yeah, it's the weekend.
Of course.
Perfect. Thank you. There you are, Paswani Impatlele from Markway Fund Managers. Right. We'll have another marketing update, by the way, coming up in an hour's time. Do not miss that, including sport as always, and including I'll take your calls too. In fact, we're going to do that. Take the calls, take some WhatsApp notes, take some text messages. We'll do that in a moment. Let me tell you, I always said I love the fact that people tweet out certain things. So we've got two people who've tweeted out. So Vuyo Meji Jelwa has tweeted, saying, I'm listening to you from UWC, preparing for a class at 1700, in fact, 5 o'clock. And then Given Makusha always does this, saying, listening from Pretoria. So there we are. Pretoria to UWC, we've got you covered. We've got you covered nationwide here on the National Pulse on SAFM.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.3 FM in Rustenburg. Call us on 086 000 2032.
Right, let's get your calls. I mean, the two big issues, the issue of South Africa, Palestine, Israel, and the issue of languages in South Africa that I've suggested, the issue of home affairs, all of that we need to cover. Let's get to Kaliwe in Soweto. Hi.
Hi, Ashraf. How are you?
I'm good indeed. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
I am good. Thank you so much. I just want to weigh in on the issue of language. You said that at the beginning of this, you mentioned that it would be ideal if we have older people trying to learn a language. What is it that we can do to make older generation to learn a language or two, which is not English or Afrikaans? I just want to say to you that battle has been fought and lost. In the late 80s, early 90s, people were eager to learn languages. They were eager. I don't know where and how did it happen that people lost momentum. So my best bet now is let's just forget the people who did not learn language, who might not want to. Let us focus on the new generation.
Okay.
Yes. My point is the other group. I mean, every generation, from the generation of apartheid, you move with new South Africa. People have their own. They more or less have hang-ups. So instead of making people, I know there were workshops. Actually, I can tell you that there were workshops.
Send them to me. I'd love to know more, because I just think we need to see. I agree and I disagree with you. I agree with you that we've missed the boat. I disagree that it can ever, like, it's done now. I just think in society there's always people who lead, and they can lead change, and they can do that right now. And we're not talking about school children in schools. We know that. We're talking about adults, right, who've missed the boat, right? And I'm just saying, And I'm just saying that it was that important in the 1990s. It was critical to nation building.
It was critical
and we
in
missed
the
it.
90s
Right.
for nation building. I had a group of friends that I would teach. I am actually able to speak both Zulu and Xhosa.
Okay.
And I would teach some Xhosa, and I would just say, no, man, you can add this in your prefix can be like this. That was a matter of interest.
Okay.
And those were the people I call friends. I'm telling you, we meet and we do not have conversations in either of those languages.
Okay, I'm telling you what, I don't know. I'm certainly, I'm very keen on building a champion nation, and I think we need to do this. I don't have an answer, but if anybody has some bright idea how we can workshop it at community-based level, I want to know, and maybe you can just hook me up on all the social media pages. You will find me there. I'm available on all social media platforms. Meyiwa, thanks for your time. Much appreciated. Okay, let's get another comment. Raisa on the issue of home affairs, right? Hi, Raisa.
Yes, that's Raisa and Hakunwana.
Raisa, okay, go ahead, yes.
Yes, Ashraf, I just want to congratulate and commend Minister Motsoaledi. Since I followed him being in the cabinet, that's Mr. Action. Unlike his nemesis, who is the deputy secretary of a certain organization who is prepared to protect corruption and then telling people that their votes are stinking. Just in passing on the issue of Israel. Ashraf, tell me, is the issue of Ukraine and Russia solved?
No, it's not solved. It's ongoing. As we're well aware of, it's ongoing.
Oh, so South Africa, actually, those are not humans. That has got nothing to do with human rights. The issue to do with human rights and killings, the humans are the ISIS guys, the Islam International, whatever.
Okay. Well, I like your line of questioning because you want it's like a naughty line, but I get what you're saying. Look, I can't answer it on behalf of government. Let government answer that. I think they've sort of said they've taken a non-aligned. They've said they've taken a non-aligned position with regard to Ukraine, Russia, but they've certainly they've interacted with both parties, Russia and Ukraine, to try and resolve that issue.
And I pray that you've got some clones of Aaron Motsoaledi in this corrupt organization so that we can have people with focused minds to do the right thing.
Which corrupt organization are you talking about?
I beg your pardon?
You said in this corrupt organization, referring to?
The ambitious national crooks.
Oh, goodness. Okay, got that. Thank you. Much appreciated. Look, it's Friday afternoon, and you know what? The good thing about South Africa, and this really, and I'm saying this in all seriousness, we can argue, we can actually even use words, election coverage and media coverage of training around election coverage. So we'll get to that just now. Let's get some other thoughts. Here's another one on language.
It's Keisha here, Western Cape. So the kiddie program that you feature every day, maybe the kids can teach us different languages, different vernacular, and somebody can compile something where different children are interviewed, and we can literally say after them, good morning, good evening, I love you, mother, I love you, daddy, etc., in all the different languages. Maybe it's something nice to do with the children program. Just a thought.
I think it's a heck of a good thought. At the very basic level, the kids who have to do homework around languages, learning a vernacular language, need to do homework on their parents at home, and then they'll all learn. So I think you're spot on. Simple, uncomplicated. Of course, it doesn't apply to those who don't have kids of that age group, but I mean, it's a great, great start indeed. Okay, let's get another. Thanks for that call. Let's get another.
Afternoon, Ashraf Garda. My one concern about this Israel thing is that our televisions, maybe there are some specific channels. When I tune up, I always see the attacks of Israelis. I don't see the other people retaliating. It's like the war is from one country to the other, and there are no journalists on the other side to show us what the Hamas, yes, are doing to the Israelites. So it's like even our broadcasting, it's one-sided. So that's why we're judging from one side of the story. But once we hear comments from people who are defending their positions as Israelites, we could see they've got effect.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me just give you my quick thought on that one there. I mean, look, listen, there's a lot of information, there's lots of misinformation on many sides, and sometimes it's so difficult to understand it. But two things are a fact here. One is, in terms of what may or may not happen in what you would call Israel, right? The problem with information there is the major international network, Al Jazeera, has been banned. Okay, and then subsequently other media has been banned. You may have just followed it a few days ago. So how would you know if there's no media covering it? That's the bottom line to that story. We will talk about media and South Africa's elections right after this.
This Election Watch feature is brought to you by Kagiso Trust. Follow the #RememberMe initiative.
Right, I'll try and as much as I can to look at some of the other messages or WhatsApp voice notes or calls as soon as we can. There's just so many crisscrossing the entire country, and we need to balance it out with talking to other guests. So we'll do that. Now, you know that the feature we've just played, the #RememberMe part of the Kagiso Trust, is all about covering the elections and voting and encouraging all of us to vote and remember those that fought so hard to vote in the first place. Now, linked to that, of course, is the coverage of the election. So we thought this is an interesting story. The Media Development and Diversity Agency, which is the MDDA. Well, they've partnered with the IEC to implement an elections training program aimed at strengthening the capacity of the community media sector to cover South Africa's election. In the context of what we said about Israel-Palestine, that's even doubly important. My guest is the Chief Executive Officer of the MDDA, and that's Shweshwe Qu. And I would say it's a coming a full circle for us, because 4 or 5 months ago you were sitting here at SFM and I was on the outside. So hello, Shweshwe.
I know, certainly. Khotsong, Ashraf, it's great to have you back on air and back on SAFM, and lovely talking to you.
Yeah, the disappointment is that you're not here. So anyway, that's how the world goes. You know, people come and people go. So that's the world. Okay, let's get to the issue. What is this plan all about?
So we since last year, the MDDA has ran elections training workshops, and we've targeted in the main community media journalists. We know that community media is the heartbeat of this country, and their role in deepening democracy really cannot be ignored. In fact, it's so important. And we recognize that there was a need for us to upskill them so that we are ready as we get into these national and provincial elections. Of course, there were a number of changes also that are expected with the current elections. So the partnership with the IEC was very important, because we brought to the community media journalists the IEC to be able to give an overview of what journalists on the ground should be expecting and how they can cover the elections and the questions they might have in the processes that the IEC will be engaging in up to the 29th of May.
And when you talk about the importance, and you're actually saying already the community media plays a very important role. So how important, what does community media do that, for example, SAFM doesn't do?
Well, the community media, which SAFM isn't able to do, is earlier on you were talking about languages and the importance of it and how some among us have lost our languages. Mm-hmm. But if you think about a community media or radio station that is out in Mdubatuba, where you have someone that's broadcasting in isiZulu, in a language that the community members are able to understand, that community radio station is also able to break down what would have otherwise been very difficult concepts presented in English, which is a language that SAFM broadcasts in. So that role is really so important. And what we've done perhaps in South Africa is we've developed access to information, but the people that have played a role in ensuring that information goes to the people at the grassroots level are those community radio stations who are able to use the official languages and even colloquial languages or languages that aren't necessarily recognized, which are spoken in those areas, including your Kilobedu, Sitokwa, or Sihlubi, if you look in the KZN area in Eastern Cape.
Okay, well, you speak my language. I certainly understand exactly what you say. So practically in the implementation of this program, you will do what?
So what we've done today, we had this workshop virtually. We had the chairperson of the IEC, Ndate Mosutu, who gave us an update of where the IEC is. And I think he was quite frank in also presenting the issues and the challenges that the IEC is dealing with and is facing as we prepare for the elections. But we also had an opportunity for community journalists from across the country to ask questions which were responded to by Ndate Mosutu. I think some of the questions are so grassroots. It's trying to understand, can I still vote if I hadn't registered to vote? Can I still register for a special vote? What are the who do I engage with and speak with on these issues? And I think the IEC was able to address those eloquently and engage. I will encourage listeners to please go to our website mdda.org.za and click on the press statements. That you will be able to also watch at least a part of that session that we had today. I thought it was very informative. Monday and Tuesday, we are going to have roundtables where we will be discussing a variety of issues with a number of stakeholders. I want to highlight this one, Ashraf, because we've got a number of elections that are taking place on the continent, here in South Africa as well, and the rest of the parts of the world, at a time where misinformation and the generative AI and images and videos and voices have really played a significant role in influencing views. And there's a need for community media journalists and journalists as a whole to also be able to see and dictate when stories are fake, just to use colloquially speaking words, or are not authentic. And those workshops that are coming up next week will focus really on the skills that those community media journalists will be needing. And I'd really like to call on any community media journalists, or even those who are interested in covering elections. I think we have a lot of people who are content creators, you would call, and they also equally can benefit from the workshops that we are covering.
Okay, so are you suggesting that people listening who are, Instagrammers, TikTokers, influencers of sorts, and if they want to still, because you want them to participate in the elections, right? They could still connect with you?
Yes, they can still connect with us. I think the reality of where we are, Ashraf, is that there is a change in the platforms and access to media. We as the MDDA obviously support in the main community and historically disadvantaged media organization in the interest of a diversified and developed media. But we can't ignore that some of the content generators are broadcasting content for their blogs and their platforms. So the workshops will be open to them, so they can go to our social media platforms at MDDA or go to our website mdda.org.za and be able to register to be able to participate there as well. But we are focusing in the main to the target market for the workshops are journalists in the community media sector, but it's not exclusive just for them.
Okay.
Also open to other journalists across the platforms, or those who call themselves content creators. I don't want to call them influencers, Ashraf. I am going to desist from that temptation.
Well, the power of influence is what it's all about. Anyway, whichever way you take it. But I think the point is well made. Feel free to tag, SFM Radio and myself on the social media platforms. I'll gladly share that. Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll certainly do, Ashraf. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think it's fabulous. And that's really what that strengthens democracy and our rules of engagement as we do in South Africa. And this is just another example of that. The Chief Executive Officer of the MDDA, Shweshwe Kulu.
This Election Watch feature was brought to you by Kagiso Trust. Follow the #RememberMe initiative. On May 29, go vote to make your voice heard. #RememberMe.
Right, so we'll have more coverage, by the way, further coverage on and another take on what's happening in Israel, and an update on those election funding numbers that are really, really interesting. All that coming up later, but now in the news hot seat, let's welcome Greg House.
Thank you and good afternoon to you, Ashraf. In this news update, Ramaphosa confident of election victory and Putin clarifies Kharkiv intentions. Good day to you. The ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says that he's not losing sleep about May 29th polls. His comments come in projections the ANC will drop in its support, especially with the emergence of the MK party. He made the comments in Greytown while campaigning in KwaZulu-Natal.
Our support is enormous in KwaZulu-Natal, and we're not concerned about our electoral returns, being as what the doomsayers are saying. Our people, in their hearts of hearts, they know that they support the African National Congress, and all we are doing now is to make sure that many of our people come out to vote. Once ANC supporters come out in their millions, we're absolutely certain of a clear victory.
The IEC says 13 political parties received over 172 million rand in donations in the fourth quarter of the financial year. The IEC report covers the period from the 1st of January to the 31st of March this year. For the first time since the inception of the Party Funding Act, the declared value of donations surpassed the 100 million rand mark in a quarter. Zuleka Kodashe reports.
The DA declared the highest number of donations for the fourth quarter at over 65 million rand, whilst Roger Jardine's Change Starts Now, which won't be participating in the May 29 polls, received over 35 million rand. The IFP received a 20 million rand donation from the Oppenheimer family, whilst the ANC, which got over 16 million rand, and Songezo Zibi's Rise Mzansi declared over 15 million rands. The EFF declared over 2 million rands in donations from companies associated with Patrice Motsepe.
Last week, the Electoral Court handed down judgment in a matter involving the Commission and 496 registered political parties that failed to account for their income. 6 parties were fined for failing to comply and were fined amounts ranging from 10,000 to 40,000 rand. In other news, a convicted murderer has been given life imprisonment by the High Court in Polokwane in Limpopo. Ngwaka Siloa shot and killed a woman outside Zanin 3 years ago. During the trial, he claimed that he was hired by the half-sister of the deceased woman as the victim was allegedly involved in sexual relations with her partner. The court has found Siloa guilty of charges including murder and conspiracy to commit murder, among others. Finally, further afield, the Russian President Vladimir Putin says there are no plans for his troops to capture Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv, at least for now. He's told a news conference that his forces were simply creating a buffer zone to protect Russia border regions.
As for what is happening in the Kharkiv direction, this is also their fault, because they shoot and unfortunately continue to shoot residential areas of the border territories. I said publicly that if this continues, we will be forced to create a safety zone, a sanitary zone. That's what we're doing. As for Kharkiv, there are no such plans today to capture the city.
Top story, the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's not losing sleep about May 29th's polls. His comments come amid projections the ANC will drop in its support, especially with the emergence of the MK party. Ramaphosa made the comments in Greytown while campaigning in KwaZulu-Natal. That's SAFM News. I'm Greg Khus.
Coming up in your sports this hour, Van der Dussen to captain Proteas side in T20 series against West Indies, and Scotty Scheffler arrested outside PGA Championship and charged with assault on police officer. More details at 5:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
And if you're just joining us, major delay alert for motorists arriving between Pretoria and the airport. There's 2 sets of roadworks, one at Clayville, another at the end of Tembisa by the R25 exit. And in the middle of those 2 work zones, a crash zone as well. So very heavy from about the sort of start of the sinkhole, but going south from that point all the way down to the Bobsfontein exit. A lot of traffic diverting off into Clayville and causing significant delays there as well. Also, the R21 going north is heavy up to Bobsfontein. There's works on the Pretoria-bound carriageway as well. Crash on the M1 North going up to Linwood, so that's quite heavy from Rigel Avenue, and a collision on Mansfield as you get through Vanderbilt Port onto Steve Biko, causing some problems still. Also, the collision at Ashburton on your way into Pietermaritzburg, that's a heavy queue that extends right back into the Linfield Park area today. And Cape Town, the standout highway queue on a pretty gentle Friday afternoon is the M5, and it's unusually busy, parking up from Klipfontein Road in Rondebosch all the way up into a very busy Kubo Get a Change. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Stay safe on the roads. SAFM is with you.
In 2006, the Democratic Alliance won Cape Town by just one seat.
With just 42 votes, he recently won Umgeni,
bringing remarkable progress to rural KwaZulu-Natal.
Because people voted for change.
DA-run Midvaal is now the best-run municipality in Gauteng.
And a new story was written for the Western Cape when people voted DA.
But if you want a new government that works, then you have to vote for it.
In this election, every single vote will count. Your vote can rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Well, I'll tell you what, from a national pulse to a global pulse, I've just heard stories about major thunderstorms in Houston, in America, in Texas, right? And those winds have blown out windows in the city, knocked out power, and demolishing buildings as well, right? So it's not an earthquake, it's winds, but on a major scale. We certainly keep an eye on that story. Love the fact that we're so engaged. People are posting pictures as well, and you can post it on WhatsApp besides on our social media platforms, which is the X platform. You can tweet it out to us there, or as well as on Facebook. And when you do, tag me, Ashraf Garda, together with SAFM Radio. Do use the all-important hashtag, the National Pulse. I see some people are commenting about to me as the Minister of Sport. Yeah, I hope you like the handle. That's how I call it, the Minister of Sport, right? I will pick out some of the further comments on languages and what they really mean. Because, here's one, and I think it's just interesting. Ashraf, language is political, which what I mean is it's a dominion of one language or domination of one language over another, and how we relate to each other as society or media. Okay, that's from Brian. I won't read the whole thing, Brian, not enough time, but I get your point on that issue. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to pick up on another take on the Israeli defense today, which we'll do in a moment, and we'll get further commentary after that.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Right, so we're going to cross shortly, when I say cross, play a recording, in fact, of the Israelis, Tamar Kaplan, Turgeman. Not quite now, just now, right? But earlier on, we chatted to Professor Chris Landsberg, in fact, from the University of Johannesburg, and he said lots of different things in reaction to the first guest I had from Jerusalem, right? But amongst the things that he said at the end, I think is, can I call it our quote of the day? Because it really got me thinking, and I think you probably may spend the whole weekend reflecting on this.
South Africa has changed its tune there to a more hardline one. The previous version, South Africa talked about genocidal intent. Now it openly says there's a genocide going on, effectively saying the Israelis, the Palestinians, were forced to move from north to south, cramped up, so that it could be obliterated, and there are no safe spaces. So South Africa is following this thing to the T, and let me tell you what the implication is, because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Ashraf, if nothing else, what South Africa is doing here is also putting international law on trial to see where the divisions will be, what the court will say, and in the long term, we will see the benefits of what South Africa has done, that no longer can Anglo-Saxon nations and countries like Israel with races with a particular melamine color be set not to be prone to commit acts of human rights. And that's a revolutionary overhaul of international relations.
South Africa putting international law on trial. That's what I want you to consider all weekend and tell me whether you concur or you do not. Right, let's get to the actual case that's taking place at the ICJ. So we've played earlier clips and there's podcasts of all the conversations we've had. Please check it out. We post it on our social media pages, also on, you can Google it too, as well as on YouTube, and we live stream them too, right? So you can sort of backplay the live stream that's currently on the X or the Facebook feed, right? Now, earlier on, the Israel's Tamar Kaplan-Trugerman, the principal deputy legal advisor of the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs, argued that it is Hamas that has brought about all the suffering and pain that the world is witnessing in Gaza, also accusing South Africa of distorting the facts and not being impartial when dealing with the situation in Gaza. So, well, don't take my word for it. Here it is.
Mr. President, members of the court, it is an honor to appear before you on behalf of the State of Israel. As you have just heard, Israel is still under attack. We are still counting more and more of our dead and attending 2,000 more who are wounded. No less than 132 children, women, and men are still held hostage in unimaginable conditions by Hamas and other Palestinian militants in Gaza. Tens of thousands of Israeli citizens are internally displaced. Most of them have not seen their homes in over 7 months. Many have no homes to return to. The very grave effects of the horrific massacre of 7 October continue to ripple through our people and communities, who must not be forgotten. They too are worthy of international law's protection. Mr. President, members of the court, I draw particular attention to the women still held hostage in Gaza. Ms. Amit Sosna, who was held captive in Gaza by Hamas for 55 days, testified recently that she was physically abused, beaten up, and chained to a bed, threatened at gunpoint, and forced to perform sexual acts on her captor. Hamas refuses to release these women and all the other hostages it holds. It brazenly refuses to alleviate the humanitarian suffering that this war has brought to all concerned on both sides. It has turned down numerous proposals for a ceasefire, and it continues to favor death and destruction as a strategy. We heard nothing about that yesterday. In fact, while South Africa made many outrageous, false statements yesterday, perhaps most striking was what it did not say. We have hardly heard the word Hamas, even though it is Hamas that has brought about all the suffering and pain that we are witnessing, the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians alike. Instead, we sat here and listened to venomous accusations, to language that is so hateful, so out of touch with reality, that it was difficult to believe we are in a court of law. Mr. President, members of the court, there is no doubt that this war is tragic and has caused great suffering on both sides. Again, this is Hamas's doing. South Africa provides an account that is not only incredibly partial, it is also distorted. But to apply the law properly, to impart justice, surely the facts must matter. These facts cannot but show that Israel is seeking consistently to abide by the law in the excruciating circumstances of warfare that Hamas has deliberately created. The blatant misrepresentation we heard yesterday cannot alter that. For a start, South Africa claims that Israel has shut down the two main land crossings through which aid enters into Gaza, this being the Rafah and Kerem Shalom crossings, and that Israel has cut Gaza off from all humanitarian, medical, and other supplies. This is patently untrue. The truth is that Israel allows and facilitates, as it has been for months, the provision of more and more humanitarian aid to the civilian population throughout the Gaza Strip. It does so through a number of crossings on a daily basis. I refer the court to the map that is now on the screen before you and also at tab 5 of your folders. Contrary to South Africa's claim, the Kerem Shalom crossing has been in continuous operation since December 2023, with one recent exception between the 5th and 8th of May, when it was closed after Hamas fired at Kerem Shalom. Even though Hamas fire continued on 8, 10, 11, 12 May, and several times even yesterday, the crossing remained open, allowing more and more aid to flow in. This crossing has been the central entry point for aid for months. I know that South Africa has not only wrongly alleged that the Kerem Shalom crossing has been shut down, it also requested that Israel relinquish control over it. I hardly need to say much about this request, given that Kerem Shalom is situated on sovereign Israeli territory. As for the Rafah crossing, to say that Israel closed this crossing is inaccurate at best. Its operation was disrupted on May 6, and since then, Israel has taken active measures and has been in intensive discussions with Egypt, supported by other international actors, in an effort to resume the flow of aid. In the meantime, and in keeping with its consistent efforts, Israel has taken immediate measures to ensure that alternative paths are available for the continued increase in its provision of humanitarian assistance to the Gaza Strip. In this context, the Prime Minister of Israel convened 2 high-level meetings to ensure continued adequate response to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister instructed the relevant authorities in Israel to take immediate interim steps to enable increased flow of aid to Gaza Strip through other routes and sources. South Africa neglected to mention yesterday that the total amount of aid entering Gaza in the last few days is now once again increasing significantly. Indeed, on 12 May, a new land crossing was opened at Erez West. It joins yet another new land crossing, fully operationalized, on May 1st at Erez East, which together allow for the entry into Gaza of additional 200 trucks per day after their inspection elsewhere.
That is the voice of Israel's Tamar Kaplan-Turgeman, who's the principal deputy legal advisor of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, once again arguing the point that it's Hamas that has brought about all the suffering and pain that we've just now witnessed in that region, in Palestine, specifically in Gaza. We'll get another comment on that. We'll get another take on that with a human rights lawyer right after this.
Stellies gets it that they can never catch Masandawana, but they want to secure the second position. Meanwhile, Kabuyelo loves it on the summit and want to grab 3 points to extend their lead. This is the DSTV Premiership. Witness the unmatched passion of Mzansi's beautiful game. Stellenbosch FC versus Mamelodi Sundowns FC. on Saturday, 18 May at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Any person aggrieved by any political advertisement or political election broadcast that is broadcast by SAFM may lodge a complaint within 5 days from broadcast with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA. To lodge your complaint, please contact ICASA's Compliance Department via telephone number on 012 568 3233. That's 012 568 3233. Or email broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. That's broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. Alternatively, complaintsccc@icasa.org.za. That's complaintsccc@icasa.org.za.
The SABC Fortune Combo radio stations, which includes SAFM, Lotus FM, and Radio 2000, seek the services of a freelance graphic designer who will collaborate with cross-functional teams to create visually compelling assets that align with our receptive brand identities and resonate with our target audiences. The minimum requirements for the position are a bachelor's degree or diploma in graphic design, visual arts, or related field, 2 to 4 years proven experience as a graphic designer with a strong portfolio showcasing a range of design projects. All interested candidates should submit their CVs and portfolio of evidence to vacancy@safm.co.za. Application closed on the 26th of May 2024. For more detailed info, visit www.safm.co.za or follow us on our social media pages at SAFM Radio.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
So just picking up on the conversation regarding South Africa, Israel at the ICJ, in another developing story, I've now just been told that FIFA are to hold an urgent meeting to decide if Israel should be thrown out of football. So that hasn't quite happened, but they may well do that very, very soon. Right, let's get these thoughts now, based upon what's happened over the last 2 days, right, with Stanley Cohen, who's an international human rights lawyer. Stanley, appreciate your time. You're live on the National Pulse.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Love sharing some time with you as always, my friend.
Much appreciated. Thank you. So, Stanley, let's start with the present tense here. What do you make of South Africa's position to once again pick up the issue of Israel and what they see as a human rights disaster or devastation that's taken place in that region yesterday and the Israeli response today?
Well, in terms of South Africa, there is no one in the world better postured, better situated to argue against genocide, to argue on behalf of human rights, that knows firsthand what it is to live under apartheid, occupation, and violation of international law. So once again, yesterday, as they've done before, the South African group were simply brilliant. They raised the law, they raised the facts, they cited everything. It's indisputable. No one can deny it. And once again, predictably, the Israeli attorneys today gave their typical response. Let me use a metaphor. If only she didn't wear a short skirt and smile at me. Israel always blames the victim. Israel always points a finger. Israel always says, woe is us. It's us that the world hates, while they continue to perpetrate unspeakable crimes. And as South Africa pointed out in its most recent request for action by the ICJ, the attack on Rafah, the ceaseless attack on Rafah, the displacement of 500,000, perhaps upwards of 1 million people, no matter what Israel says, the refusal to permit even minimal amounts of human aid, of food, of water, of medicine, of people to go in and out to deal with the crisis on the ground, the famine, the disease that is spreading, is once again proof positive that Israel is engaged in genocide. Israel likes to cherry pick before the ICJ because they know the ICJ generally only takes a position, forget about the fact it can't enforce it, when it comes against states and communities of color. But once again, Israel says to the ICJ, we're doing this. We're trying to do our best. It's Hamas. The whole world has seen with open eyes exactly what's going on, exactly what Israel is doing, and exactly that they are in violation of international law, of the law of genocide, as beautifully set forth for months now by South Africa. So nothing that Israel said today can remake the facts.
So what do you say about that position that, and yes, and we are quoting, it is Hamas that has brought about all the suffering and pain that the world is witnessing in Gaza? That comes from the Israel's Tamar Kaplan at Turgaman.
Well, putting aside the rhetoric and the nonsense that it is Hamas that was the trigger, because you can get into a debate about what did or did not happen on October 7th. International law, the conventions of genocide, do not say there's a test of proportionality. International law does not permit, as Israel has done, to slaughter 35,000 people, 20,000 of them women and children, if not more, to deny food, to deny medical aid. No matter who or what may have been the trigger, the test of proportionality does not apply. And even if it did, there can be no comparison. Blaming Hamas is like blaming the world. If the world didn't hate us, says Israel, we wouldn't have to slaughter everyone, so we get a free pass in it. It's nonsense, it's Hezbollah, it's rhetoric, and it is entirely inconsistent with the clear edict of international law. International law says once you unleash your guns, once you initiate your attacks, this is what you can do, and this is what you cannot do. It does not say there's a test of proportionality. It does not say you are allowed to do whatever you may based upon what might have happened to you at one point in time. If they did that, then every country that's ever been attacked would be free to unleash genocide against everyone, as Israel is doing, without any control, any self-restraint, and inconsistent with international law. It's rhetoric. That's all it is.
Now, you know that first application that South Africa made end of December, January, right? And now they've done it again. My understanding is that idea of ceasefire, that didn't quite happen. So would it be fair to say, or accurate to say, that South Africa didn't actually succeed in that first round of the application, and therefore they may not succeed again?
Well, they may not, quote unquote, succeed, but succeed is in the eyes like beauty in the eyes of the beholder. South Africa's first action clearly brought the world's attention to what Israel was doing. South Africa clearly brought the focus upon Israel. South Africa clearly forced world communities to take a position. Now, the reality of it is the ICJ is not the court that people believe it is. It doesn't have powers of enforcement. It's very much like an advanced moot court argument, a debating society. But that doesn't mean that if you don't prevail, you don't raise the issue. South Africa, this is now the third time that it's submitted strong, compelling, absolute proof that Israel is violating international law and committing genocide. The fact that the ICJ has sat, not surprisingly, frozen, has failed to even take a modicum of power and to tell Israel, stop, ceasefire and withdraw, and then to go back to the United Nations General Assembly for possible sanctions speaks more and almost entirely about the ICJ and nothing about the noble position that South Africa and Nicaragua and now Egypt and now Turkey who are also joining have taken. You don't look to the end result. We'd all like to believe it would have immediately resulted, but South Africa put Israel's feet to the fire. It exposed it. It created political tensions. There are countries that have walked away from it, people that are no longer providing weapons to Israel, pressure on Biden. So South Africa's initiation and continuing battle against Israeli genocide is powerful, it's essential, and it's important. The fact that the ICJ has not even taken preliminary steps to enforce it does not mean that either South Africa's effort was a failed effort or it should stop.
Okay.
The world needs to continue to build.
We've got 30 seconds, and here's an important answer from you, Stanley Cohen. We earlier chatted to Chris Landsberg, professor from South Africa, and he said that South Africa has put international law on trial. Your response in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. The world has to take a look at what international law was supposed to be and what it's become. It's not the Nuremberg tribunals. We have these nice and pretty tribunals that have been set up that are essentially powerless, that look at race, that look at background, that look at country and purpose and make decisions, and even then are largely silent. Putin, an arrest warrant was issued within 15 days. Putin and Russia was considered war crimes and told to stop. Nothing happened. It needs to be reevaluated in the light of recent experience that the current international tribunals, whether it be the ICJ or the ICC, are puppets. They're doing very little, if anything, and this is the perfect example.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Stanley Cohen, international human rights lawyer, saying it as he sees it. Let's get the news headlines. Here's Greg House.
Thank you, Ashraf. A quick look at the headlines. The IEC's issued a statement reminding eligible voters who intend to cast their ballots outside their voting district in the May 29th elections to notify the Electoral Commission by midnight tonight. The ANC President, Cyril Ramaphosa, says he's not losing sleep about the upcoming elections. And police in France have shot and killed a man who tried to set fire to a synagogue. More on that story and other news at 6 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It stays a major backlog of traffic on the R21 this afternoon, coming out of Pretoria down to the airport. Two sets of roadworks, one before Clayville, before Olifantsfontein, another just at about the Bupsfontein exit. A significant amount of lanes closed and a really significant and proper thick and heavy backlog of traffic from about the sort of start of the sinkhole restrictions. If you're coming southbound, obviously the sinkhole on the northbound, but about from those lane closures all the way down to Bupsfontein. Really proper delays there. A lot of traffic congestion, really proper congestion in the Clayville area as well. All that traffic coming out of the R21, thinking it can get into Clayville and get down towards the airport quicker, but you just run into major congestion there, particularly around Pretoria Road and Olifantsfontein Junction. Hardly anything moving. If you need a flight this afternoon or into this evening, make sure you've got plenty of time to attack that one. Otherwise, if you're heading up towards Pietermaritzburg, the N3's got a couple of issues today. It's very heavy from Tollgate Bridge territory out towards Spaghetti Junction, and then you parked up from Linfield Park up to now breakdown at Ashburton in amongst the roadworks. Cape Town having a pretty gentle trip home, with the main exception being the Coburg interchange. That's busy. M5's heavy from the N2 going up to the interchange and Brooklyn side. The Coburg Road through the interchange is quite heavy, and going into that area, Four Trekker Road from Salt River Circle into Central Maitland all jammed as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
Right, I see people are calling you the Minister of Sport as well. I just thought, if you're okay with it, fine. If Zuzi Kodwa's not okay with it, he can complain to me. We'll think about it.
Well, perhaps I'm coming into Zuzi Kodwa's shoes soon. All right, let's get into your sport. Starting off with cricket, Rassie van der Dussen will captain a Protea squad, which has been blasted by 3 IPL players in a 3-match T20 series against West Indies. Gerald Coetzee, Quinton de Kock and Andrew Nortje have been added to the squad for a series that precedes the T20 World Cup. And remember, Van der Dussen was not selected for the T20 World Cup. And coach Rob Walter says Rassie brings a wealth of experience.
He's the captain.
Yeah.
Obviously, just brings a wealth of experience in our group. It is a relatively inexperienced group, barring obviously the 3 guys who are arriving from the IPL. So, yeah, just a guy who we feel will be good in the leadership space, especially with the squad here, and offer huge value given the T20 cricket he's been playing.
In football, the race continues this weekend as far as the CAF Champions League spots are concerned between Orlando Pirates and Stellenbosch FC. As things stand, Steve Barker's side are in the driving seat in second place with 50 points, while Jose Rivero's team is in third with 49 points. And this weekend, we'll see Stellies host Sundowns at the Athlone Stadium tomorrow, 3 p.m. And at the same hour, TS Galaxy will be home to Orlando Pirates and Marbella Stadium, and the battle for the CAF Champions League football will conclude next weekend. Still staying with football as we build up to the last day of the Premier League, with the trophy race set to go down to the wire for Arsenal and Manchester City. A win for City over West Ham, their 6 titles under Pep Guardiola, will mean that the team has an amazing 175 wins from 228 games rather. Their points per season will average under 93 points per season, meaning Arsenal Arsenal, in the meantime, Arsenal are just a win away from 16 or winning 16 of their last 18 games, and they face Everton. Meanwhile, Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp says that he will not forget a single day of his time in charge of the Reds as he prepares to bring down the curtain on his Liverpool reign. The Reds boss will take charge of Liverpool for the last time at Anfield on Sunday, and he says he's already started saying goodbye to the staff and players at the training ground. And there's also a clip of him taking his last picture with the players and the staff of Anfield.
I remember the time that Man United, Ferguson called it a day after 23, 24 years, and he said goodbye for the last time. And what we didn't know is it was also goodbye to league titles. Beware, Liverpool. Okay, that's it.
Most players said goodbye in their way. We had a little barbecue here. It was really nice. The day before yesterday was with the staff of Chapel Street. It was really, really nice. Sun hit the stadium after that. I had very emotional moments, of course, in between. But it's a lot to do as well. I'm not sure, but as we were a few, let me say like that. I'm not sure if not everybody has now one. But it's all part of the thing. Look, saying goodbye, I don't think is ever nice. But saying goodbye without feeling sad or feeling hurt or whatever, that would just mean that the time you spent together was not right and not great, and we had a great time. So it was.
You can even hear the emotions in his voice, but I'm not done yet, Ashraf. Almost there. Let's move on to golf. World number one golfer Scottie Scheffler is facing 4 charges following his arrest outside the PGA Championship this morning. Scheffler was charged with second-degree assault on a police officer, along with lesser charges of third-degree criminal mischief, reckless driving, and disregarding signals from officers directing traffic. The story is that he tried to drive past a police officer while driving around a crash scene, but my understanding is that he's been released from jail. In rugby, Reniel Hugo will captain a Sharks team featuring 14 changes for the clash against Cardiff in Durban tomorrow, as a host of senior players have been rested for next week's Challenge Cup final. The match day 23 features Springboks Siku Noche, Apiwe Yankee and Cohen Bosch, surrounded by journeymen and promising youngsters. On that note, now I am done.
Now you're done. Okay, Minister of Sport, we'll talk next week. Yeah.
Yes, I'll be back next week for SAFM Sport.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, we have still more to come, certainly around the money of elections. We talk about the business of sport. What about the business of an election? So a whole lot of political parties now have revealed their donations or funding for the last year or so, and we'll talk about that because there's some really interesting analysis to come out of that. But first things first, let's get to talk about the markets now with the MoneyWeb market update. And all week has been brought to you by Dudu Ramela. Oh, in fact, Dudu's taken the weekend off. Jimmy, let me just get this right. I mean, like the obvious thing is if you take a weekend off, if you take a week off, you do not come back on a Friday. Something's wrong here because Jimmy, you're on a Friday and Dudu's taking the day off. Doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, go ahead.
It's the dedication, Ashraf. It's the dedication. I was away this week at the Nampo Harvest Day in Bothaville. It's one of the biggest agricultural gatherings that we have in the country. It's a fantastic event. It's the 56th year they've had that event, and so I couldn't miss out on some of the great agricultural developments that South Africa goes through.
Can I just tell you this? I heard your interview regarding that same the same event about 2 weeks ago. You spoke to the CEO or something, right?
Yes.
And listening to him, I'm like, maybe I need to go pay that place a visit. So you certainly got me thinking about it, and I sort of had the sense that you were going there now. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fantastic event. But while I was away, it seems as though the markets didn't wait for me to come back. The rand strengthening, closing out the week around 18 rand 18 cents against the dollar, 23 rand and 8 cents against the euro, and 1976 against the euro. Sorry, 23 rand and 8 cents against the British pound. And by all accounts, it looks as though the rand and the local markets are strengthening off the back of just some overall positive sentiment. Sentiment has been under quite a bit of pressure of late in the last couple of weeks, especially when we look at things like resources. And resources had a good day, actually. They were up about 2.2%. Industrials were down 1.02%, with financials down 0.1%, which meant the all share finished flat. The top 40 finished flat. But we will take the wins where they come from on the currency side of it. If we have a quick look at the commodities, gold is back above $2,400, up about 1.2% at $2,408 at the moment. Brent crude still surprisingly holding steady at $83.60 a barrel. I suppose the crude oil inventories are not concerned for the market at this stage, but the price of silver, price of platinum, and the price of palladium are all in the green. Silver topped $30.60 or $30.70, with platinum and palladium both back above $1,000. That's going to bode well for our platinum or PGM counters locally. That price has been under pressure for quite a bit of time from their perspective. If we have a quick look at some international markets and those movements, Sydney was down about 0.8% today. Hong Kong was up about 1%, with Shanghai up around 1%. So mainland stocks doing slightly better there. Tokyo was down 0.3%. The DAX in Germany down 0.1% alongside the FTSE down about 0.2%. The CAC 40 in France also down 0.2%. US markets at the moment are sitting almost flat. They've still got a bit of time to trade for the rest of the evening, but at the moment they are sitting flat to marginally down about 0.02 or 0.03%. If you're looking at cryptos, the Bitcoin price is back towards that 70,000 level, sitting at about $67,100 there. Ethereum above 3,000 again, $3,101. I think what I'm looking out for next week is definitely going to be the Chinese interest rates that are coming out early next week, followed by the South African CPI numbers. Those are going to be very telling. I think we might see a lot of or some volatility towards the end of next week, because our elections would then be the Wednesday that follows that. So we're going to be tracking how the market continues to move. By all accounts, it kind of looks as though we're seeing a bit of a pump and dump situation where the market kind of rallies in the opposite direction in anticipation of a certain set of results, and then when those results then materialize, you'll start to see the market move the other way. I hope this isn't the case. I hope that this is not what's going to happen with South African markets, because that would then mean a weaker rand post the elections. But by all accounts, the positivity still remains in the market, and we will take it while it remains, and we'll catch up with the listeners next week.
All right, and that's where we can leave it. So you have a good weekend. I know there's no marketing show, there's no markets or business show coming up after 6. So have a good weekend. Jimmy will connect with you on Monday. In fact, we'll connect with you as the listener after this.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 106.2 FM in Thohoyandou.
Going to chat to Dr. Ongama Mtimka regarding the IEC revealing the declared value of donations to political parties and some of the implications around that. Looking forward to that conversation just now. But let's get to your calls. Loyiso in the South Coast. Hi, Loyiso.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good indeed. Right? Go ahead. What's your point?
I believe that racial harmony, one of the stumbling blocks to racial harmony in South Africa, is lack of understanding of each other's cultures. And I'm convinced that culture is centered around language. If you understand one's language, you'd understand easily the cultures of the people and be easy to integrate. A quick case in point is some two personalities in politics, Athol Trollip in the Eastern Cape and Mr. Papas here in KZN. They got respect across their political parties because of their understanding of black people. Now some smart people understood that, while others are slow in taking new languages, like the previous lady here who called, then it's easier to just teach the kids. They came with that idea that at least schools, it was mandatory to take 2 languages, 1 African language and 1 English. But the problem there is that Afrikaans is considered an African language.
Yeah.
So it was easy. It is generally easier for white kids to just take Afrikaans as a second language because, well, it's easy for them. They'll pass easier.
Well, if I know when my kids were much younger, when they were real lighties and they went to school, it was obvious that they had to learn, let's call it now, an African language. But immediately we found the biggest problem at that stage, there were not enough teachers. And it's a deficit that we're paying the price for today, because that should not have been the case, not in a democratic South Africa. All right? But your point is well made. I mean, the 2 politicians' examples you gave are exactly that. Their ability to transcend because of language gives them ability to connect to a far broader community in a way that others simply cannot do. Loyiso, thanks for that call.
Thank you.
Have a magic weekend, okay? Thank you. Much appreciated. Right. There's further calls, or rather, in fact, I'll pick out some comments on languages, as well as some of the other issues we've had around Israel and Palestine.
Then Ashraf, it's Boran from Togoza. Once SIU get enough evidence, these people must be charged with treason. They are destroying our country. Thank you. Bye.
They are destroying our country. I'm not too sure what you meant by that, because I'm a bit unclear about that. Okay, hopefully we'll pick up that in a moment. Right, what we're going to do now, let's get into the election funding issue and try and understand some of the nuances, and they are there right after this.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Stellies gets it that they can never catch Masandawana, but they want to secure the second position. Meanwhile, Kabuyelo loves it on the summit and want to grab 3 points to extend their lead. This is the DSTV Premiership. Witness the unmatched passion of Mzansi's beautiful game. Stellenbosch FC versus Mamelodi Sundowns FC on Saturday, 18 May at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Well, I just want to pick up one quick one on language. Here's one, right? It's got me thinking. The language issue is not going to be easy for whites. Honestly, I saw it. My wife was working as a domestic worker for Afrikaners who had a baby girl, and they then asked my wife to teach her a Setswana language until the baby was married. And it was difficult for her to speak Setswana. My take is most of them are not interested. It takes someone who is interested to know. Well, maybe that's the plan, is to get someone interested in the first place. Well, I'm certainly interested in political funding, and I think you should be interested in that too, which we'll talk about in a moment. But reflecting on the past, Frank Chikane was detained, tortured and poisoned by the apartheid government. But he never stopped fighting for freedom. In 1994, he flew in a helicopter over the endless lines of South Africans voting for the first time and said afterwards that what he saw was unimaginable. On May the 29th, the Kagiso Trust Remember Me initiative encourages South Africans to honour Chikane's struggle by exercising the right he fought so hard for, the right to vote. # Remember Me.
You are listening to the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Right, I'm certainly keen to know about the nuances, if anything, that's emerged from the political parties, their funding now been made public. Dr. Ongama Mtimka is with me. He's a political analyst based at the Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha. Dr. Mtimka, appreciate your time. You're on the National Pulse.
Good evening, Ashraf, and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Right. So maybe first things first. These numbers that have been published, were they published by the IEC? Were they voluntarily published by the parties? What's happened there?
Well, they were published by the IEC after having been declared by the political parties. And we know that I think we're going on year 3, if not year 2, actually, of these declarations that were made possible by the Political Party Funding Act, which, by the way, it has now a spanner in the works, in the sense that the electoral amendment matters bill has been passed, and it actually gives some leeway on the president as far as what determining the threshold of what needs to be declared. And we are actually now in some uncertainty, in the sense that as things stand, the electoral amendment, the electoral matters amendment bill has come into force, which means that that's the bill now, as things stand, that actually is going to be that is enforced, and therefore between now and the 29th of May, parties can receive huge amounts of monies, which are probably not going to be declared. I haven't looked at the law yet in terms of whether there are transitional arrangements between this last act and this one. But anyway, that's something for another day, Ashraf. But these declarations have been very interesting for us as South Africa, because they've thrown light on who funds political parties, and giving us, an opportunity to be able to debate things like whether funders enable democracy and therefore are crucial in the sense that they grease the wheels of political parties so that they can deepen democratic life in the country. Because remember, political parties are a conduit between legislative assemblies, that is parliament, or legislatures in provinces, and the people. It is political parties that mediate the interests of the general public and making of the law. But others may see funders as captors of political parties with a view to benefit from business-friendly laws, or in fact extracting direct benefits.
And what do you think? Do they enable democracy or they captors?
Thank you for that, because I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that it's important to receive funding to be able to deepen democratic life in a country, because political parties crisscross the country, ensure that voters participate in processes. But when you then have public declarations, they help us to stand guard over dubious decisions by politicians which may favor their funders. But when you create a ambiguity, like we are now sort of seemingly regressing, and have ambiguity as far as what monies should be declared, and declarations about who funds, then we regress. But generally, I think I am of the view that we need political parties to be funded, and we must see who funds them, and we must be able to actually guard our democracy against nefarious agendas by funders, while we appreciate them funding political parties.
Okay, so let's deal with what we know. So yes, maybe I'm agreeing with you and sitting on the fence in between the two of the two extremes, but let's deal with what we know about the funders now. So what's emerged?
I beg your pardon?
What's emerged regarding the funding for this election?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, very interesting trends. First of all, we see that there's a few individuals, and I think in the latest declarations there are about 50 individuals, trusts and businesses that are giving amounts that need to be declared to political parties. Remember that the report is not giving us everybody who funds political parties, but everybody who makes declarations who makes donations that need to be declared. That is 100,000 and above.
Right.
Also, what we're seeing is that the DA is the most favored as far as the funding allocations are concerned, followed by the ANC, and then, interestingly, the now aborted change starts now, and then Rise Mzansi and IFP and everybody else. The FF, which is the third biggest party, has remained, the lowest of the funded. Among the lowest.
So can we just pause on that, because I think that's so interesting.
Sure.
So if we say that people follow, they fund parties because of influence, or they fund parties to enhance democracy, right? Then you would think that where influence goes, that the ANC would have the biggest funding, because they clearly are in the position of most influence right now.
Indeed, and in terms of the allocations as per I forgot what the funding regime is called, but it's controlled by the I think political party fund or something, multi-party fund within the IEC. That's how the IEC would allocate based on representation. But we know that the DA was always concerned about this because it favors the current whatever the status quo in Parliament at a given time. But but it's interesting that when it comes to who business funds the most, it's a question of who they think is likely to protect their interests. And those interests, by the way, may not necessarily be contrary to the general public interest, because business wants a stable country. Mm-hmm. And it may be that they are funding a stable country and a well-governed country. That's the idea. But obviously, also the DA in recent years has tended to overemphasize the issue of pro-business policies to the extent that, for example, they're talking about greater trade liberalization, among other things, which then says in this relationship is not unidirectional. It's not parties coming to receive their check and then they leave, and policy is not being influenced.
Then you made the point that a party that received I think like 35 million rands was led by Roger Jardine, and that party is not contesting the election this year.
Yeah, so business is known for making estimates about viability when they make investments, and clearly, they were trying to do that with supporting Roger Jardine again, perhaps from a perspective that says he is a trusted leader. Let's put our bets also behind him. But unfortunately, that didn't pay off, because in politics, you don't just come by qualifications and experience. You come by the ability to build organizations fast if you are approaching an election. And I think that others were able to do so. I would want to encourage business to continue to fund, political parties, but maybe the modalities should differ. There should be also bias to funding the parties through the IEC, so that there could be a lot more equitable funding of parties.
Well, I must tell you, that's a line that I've certainly taken for a long time before, that, if you want to enhance democracy, put all that money into one big pot, right?
Yeah.
And then let that get divided. Now, okay, the flip side of that is I think the point you made earlier, that current pot that the IEC divides is based upon the performance of the previous election. So the incumbent will always have the advantage.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of exciting new parties that have come into the political scene in South Africa. And so many South Africans would agree that we actually needed new parties who do not come either with the attitude of wanting to withdraw liberation dividends or the racial baggage that comes with some of the parties. So I think a hybrid is correct as far as there's transparency in the manner that we have.
And then moving away from the parties, but to the funders, right? The Oppenheimers come up very, very prominently, but I think also Patrice Motsepe's come up as he's funded two parties, right?
Yeah, I think three, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So it's interesting that the funders do two things as far as I see things at the moment. One, there's the funding for centrist to center-right parties. If you look at the Oppenheimers, they've got, in the funding period, not just in the last quarter, they've funded the DA, IFP, and previously Rise Mzansi, to the extent that we can think the family as coherent, by the way, because there's another issue. And then if the Martin Moshao, who stays with the Action SA, and then we see what looks like a hedging from the Motsepes, the ANC, the EFF, and I think one other party also. It's interesting how, good people who have founded parties like think General Olomisa, think Musi Maimane, are not gaining traction among the funders, but you can see that these are credible leaders who've actually been there for some time. So it's a dog-eat-dog funding environment, if you like.
Yeah, well, there you are. There's lots to mull over, lots to think about, and I think the power of influence of these funders always comes to the fore. But the flip side is, I think, the hedging of the bets. So just think of a person, playing. I'm not a gambler, but just playing as like out of 5 colors, just sort of covering 3 colors. Hopefully, you're going to get it right, but inevitably, they may often get it completely wrong. Well, much appreciate your time, Dr. Ongama Mtimka. It's been really fascinating talking to you, political analyst based at the Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha. Well, that's it for the show, just about. It's been a crazy week because for 3 days of this week we were at a conference, as you know, part of SAFM's workshop, a strategy workshop, and hopefully we'll see some of those plans being implemented sometime soon. That's the one thing. But the whole team, as always, puts it together, not just today, but the entire week. So a good time for me to thank every one of them, KG, and then Tumi, of course, and Kamogelo, together with DJ Keys and Pusani and Temba Dlamini. But very important, a big thank you to you for engaging with us, to being part of the show, and making that commitment every single day of the week from 3 to 6 to effectively drive the national pulse, because you do just that. Goodbye, good night, have a great weekend. In fact, I understand that coming up just after the news is, as always, This Week Today with Oliver Dixon. But before that, it's the news at 6 with Greg House.
Thank you again, Ashraf. A reminder from the IEC over voting districts and Ramaphosa confidence of election victory. Good evening to you. We begin with election news. The IEC's issued a statement reminding eligible voters who intend to cast their ballots outside their voting districts in the May 29th elections to notify the Electoral Commission by midnight tonight. The IEC says the general rule is that a voter casts their ballot in the district where they are registered and that the Commission must be notified if the voter intends to vote in a different district. Voters can send their notifications to cast their ballots in a different district by visiting www.elections.org.za. That website again is www.elections.org.za. The ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says that he's not losing sleep about the elections. His comments come amid projections the ANC will drop in its support, especially with the emergence of the MK party. He made the comments in Greytown while campaigning in KwaZulu-Natal.
Our support is enormous in KwaZulu-Natal, and we're not concerned